And we're live. What's up, everybody? Thank you all for tuning in. We're here for another call-in show. I just dropped a link for anyone who wants to join the stream. It's really an opportunity for viewers to be able to come on, share their thoughts, ask questions, give feedback. Obviously, we're going to keep it respectful. We will hold space for a whole wide array of different views. So we're not scared of different views. Come and express yourself, but really make an effort to do it in a way that will be heard by the other side. Because if all you're doing is speaking and it's falling upon deaf ears, then what really is the point of that communication? Often when we communicate today, we are using language and terminology that resonates with those who already agree with us, right? And it's so much easier to just preach to the choir, speak within our own echo chamber. It's comfortable, it's easy. We get all this positive reinforcement in the form of likes, comments, and shares. But what impact are you having? If you're able to work to communicate in a way that the other side will hear you, then you have the ability to change minds. So keep that in mind when coming on. Before we get started, thank you to all our supporters, our patrons, and our YouTube members. And a big shout out to our Patreon visionary members. We have Renee Gordon and Matthew Coggins. For $20 a month, you could get your name shouted out at every episode. But any amount of support is greatly appreciated. If anyone's wondering where the money goes, the idea is to hire somebody and eventually a full team to help manage this channel so we could expand, so we could get this content, take this reconciliatory approach to millions of people instead of tens of thousands. I guess if we look at our data, we reached around 200,000 people the past month, which is great, but I think we could over time get that to 200 million. So that's the goal. For those who don't know, I work full time. I'm building a company and community called Grateful Giraffes. You can check us out at gratefulgiraffes.com. So I don't have much time. I'm doing this out of passion more than anything else. It's a topic that's close to home, close to heart. And I want to keep doing this, but I could definitely use help. So the support helps us do it. And you can find ways to support us in the description of this. Everyone tuning in, thanks for joining. Let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Cool. I see we have our first caller. Romy, are you ready to come on? I see you turned your camera off for a moment. You don't need to have your camera on, but if not, just give yourself a thumbnail for the aesthetic. As soon as you give me the green light, I'll bring you on. So we have BCFC Ireland here from Ireland. Good to see you. For those who have been watching for quite some time, back in 2001, then when there was a wave of violence, we did this cringe meme review, and it was a lot of fun. I'd like to do it again, but it seems like there's a lot less cringe memes. Like people aren't doing memes like they were back in 2021. There's just as many, if not more, cringe takes, but I haven't really found enough memes to do the show. So what I think I'm going to do is go through different Twitter accounts who are talking about the conflict, some of the biggest accounts, and just kind of do a debunking. And oh boy, is there a lot to debunk these days. So either send me cringe memes that you want reviewed and debunked, or send me accounts you'd like me to review. Romy, are you ready to come on? Cool. Romy, how are you?
Hi.
Welcome.
How many people are watching this? I'm not like...
Right now we're at around 20.
Okay.
But just so you know, I mean, it will get to 1,000 plus over the next few days. No pressure, but that's generally our number.
Okay. So, yeah.
What's on your mind?
A lot of things. I've been trying to get off social media because it's way too hard to see people like, wishing for your death.
Smart decision.
And it's hard to see like, people denying that babies are killed. It's like, why are you trying to be like, okay, like your side people are dying, but our side people are dying too. You can't like deny one thing in order to make your your point stronger, you can't
Right.
dismiss the death of the Israeli side in order to make the Palestinian side stronger, or the other way around. So it's hard to like, you know, be in social media when everything, and you know, there are 200 Muslims in the world and only about 16 million Jews. So of course the Palestinian side, which the Muslims, you know, have more emotional connection to, that's going to be the stronger side on social media.
Right. I would say we have the the pro-Israel and Jewish side has more institutional support, but the pro-Palestine side
Yeah.
has more grassroots support, just by
Yeah.
sheer numbers.
Just look
Um,
at like the marches and the,
right.
you
Yeah.
know,
You
everything.
know, about what you said about the atrocity denialism, which we're seeing, people are saying that only soldiers were killed and all the civilians killed were done by Israeli soldiers, and that
Yeah.
is hard to see. But I want to bring light to what I think a grave mistake Israel and the pro-Israel side is making, which just contributes to this. So a lot in the pro-Israel side are running wild with claims that are just corroborated, that don't have evidence to them, and that is
Like
being
what?
used that's being used against us. So here's one, for example. There was the 40 beheaded babies that went
Yeah.
like wildfire, and
That was like shown immediately that it was a mistake that a reporter made, but you know, 40 killed babies is not any better.
well, so but even that we still don't have. So I'm going simply based on the numbers, the names that have been released, because when Israel and Hamas are at war, they're not only at war over bombs and bullets, but they're at war over PR and narratives.
Yeah.
Both Israel and Hamas have a history of lying, and they have an incentive to do so. So just because Israel says something or just because Hamas says something, we should always take that with a grain of salt, especially in time of war. And what many in the
Yeah.
pro-Israel and pro-Palestine side they're doing, they're taking their respective side, their government, as the absolute truth, and that's a mistake because they're both lying. The supporters propagate that lie, and then it's then used against them, ruining the credibility of that side.
I I can disagree. Of course, everything should be taken with a grain of salt, but the Palestinian side, especially in Gaza, Hamas oppresses its people by, you know, they don't really, they teach them stuff from age like 0, and in Israel they do teach us things, but you know, they don't get into politics in school. Like I never learned anything about the conflict in school. And we have freedom of like, you know, we can go to the outside world, we can, you know, we can check, we have, you know, people who check on the sources and see if they're reliable. We don't just believe everything.
Well,
Even if someone from the government says something, I don't believe it like straightforward. Like I have
right.
to check
So
myself.
that's definitely the smart approach. And this isn't about comparing. I'm not here to compare the sides, but both our governments are making up stories, and the population generally are not checking the credibility of these sources. So I'm gonna cite what we know based on what has been verified. This doesn't mean there aren't more numbers. Not all the names of those killed have been released, so the numbers might change. But if you look at the list of everybody killed on October 7th, there are 30 people under the age of 18, and there's only one baby named. So it's not right now to say 40 babies were killed. It's possible, but it actually seems unlikely. So we stick with the
I
narrative
agree
that
with you on that.
right. So the more we go forward with the narrative that doesn't have any evidence to support it, that is then used against us as
Yeah,
everything we're saying is lying. So if we
I
want to
agree. You
fight
should only check your
exactly, so
sources.
if we want to fight atrocity denialism, we need to be very accurate. And those who are just promoting these claims that are not substantiated, that is fuel to the fire, which is atrocity denialism, right? And whenever I try to point this out, people get very offended. They say, "Why are you also denying the atrocity?"
No,
But
it's
it's the
just,
exact opposite. The best way
yeah,
to fight it is to be accurate,
exactly.
remain credible with everything you say. So that's one of the biggest claims that was made. That's still being shared. Anthony Blinken, for example, in Congress, he said that there was a video with the family at a table and the father's eye was gouged out, and then the mother's breast was cut off, and then the baby's foot was cut off. That most likely also is made up, but that was widely shared. And I'll tell you how one reason I could say with fair confidence it was made up. If you look at the ages that he shared, he said it was a son and a daughter, ages 6 and 8. You could look at all the names released. There's no family that matches that description. Furthermore, there's all these videos that haven't been released, and the Israeli government is saying, we're not releasing it out of respect to the family, which is true. The reason Israel doesn't release photos and videos is out of respect to the family. But there are many NGOs that their job is to actually see videos, confirm them, and then be able to do a credible report. The fact that Israel hasn't done that means that any claim of an unreleased video should also be taken with a grain of salt. So we could confidently say an atrocity happened. There is no denying that. It was the largest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust. It's horrific what happened, and we can make that claim without over exaggerating, without changing the numbers, without promoting anything that's unverified. And I think that's just a much better and more accurate way to tell the world what happened without losing credibility.
Yeah. Also, though, I think, there's the video that the IDF, made. It's like 45 minutes, and they showed it to the parliament in Israel.
Yeah, yeah.
And I heard that it's gonna be, released to the press, not to the press, to like what's it called? To other, diplomatic you know
And they should release it to NGOs. That is definitely the way to do it. I
yeah,
don't think they should
but
release it to the
that's
public.
I've seen things that, people are denying, and I've seen them, AI can't create that. It's like stuff
Not yet, at least.
that
But
made
yeah,
me sick to my stomach, and it's people,
right,
people I know, like from friends and stuff. It's not like some, person that no one knows of. It's like real people, and
right.
people are like trying to like dismiss it. But another thing I wanted to say is, from people I see from Israel and from people that are pro-Palestine, they say either Palestine doesn't exist or Israel doesn't exist, to dismiss the other country. That's something that's like very like strong. I see it everywhere. And people don't talk about it enough. You can't just, like no one if someone says from Israel Palestine doesn't exist, everyone says like, yeah, you're right, yeah, or the other side, and it's
Right.
like, why how is that gonna bring peace? Because
Yeah.
people are just
Yeah.
trying to like be all petty, and I just feel like nothing in the media is actually bringing peace, especially, reporters who are trying to like, make how do you say, I'm sorry, my English is not that good, but trying to make two people fight. Like, why are you trying to do that? You're just trying to create
Right.
sensation and trying like clickbait or something like that. But
Yeah.
it's really hard to
So
see
I'll
that.
comment on that in just a moment. David and Joseph will bring you on in just a moment. But yeah, I totally agree. Some say Israel doesn't exist, others say Palestine doesn't exist. That statement has never convinced the other side of anything. All it does is further inflame
Yeah.
them. And if you say Palestine doesn't exist, all you do is strengthen the voices of those saying Israel doesn't exist. Those two voices are fuel to each other's fire. And it's ironic, 'cause often greatest enemies do nothing but enhance each other's strength, right? And yeah, it's true. There's all these outsiders that don't have skin in the game that are just fanning the flames. They want to see one side destroy the other side, and they have nothing to lose regardless of what happens. So I very much agree. Rami, I'm going to bring more people on. You're more than welcome to stay. We're going to have a little group discussion. David, welcome. Joseph, welcome. Uh, David, real quick, because I saw you made a comment, but I do want to correct you on that. You said that it seems most of the casualties were soldiers. So out of all the names released, it seems like around 25 to 30% were soldiers. The rest were civilians. And this is based on the names released. What we're seeing on Twitter, and there's so much misinformation. Some of the biggest accounts are sharing this list of all the names, and you see that the soldiers are in a different color, and it takes up half the page. So based on that, they're concluding that at least half were soldiers. But because a soldier includes their rank, it takes up more space. It's just such a dumb and intellectually dishonest. I'm not accusing you of this, David. I imagine you probably just saw this on Twitter, but these large accounts sharing this information, they're literally doing it based on how much space the names take instead of actually going to the list and looking at the data and seeing that it's around 30%. But yeah, David, what's up? And then Joseph will go to you.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem, thanks for doing the stream again. Yeah, it's tough to get the facts, so I just saw that tweet in the morning and didn't look into it much more beyond that. I was putting in the chat I actually heard from Luke Ford this different signaling that it appears Israel is signaling mostly to its neighbors and to Arabs, power signaling, saying Israel is here to stay. And the reason Israel is here to stay is because of power, as opposed to in the West, generally it's a virtue signal where we're trying to say, well, Israel is the moral actor, the better side. And it seems directly in conflict. It's hard to correspond the two narratives. And, I know liberal Jews the last few years, maybe coming out of like the Shalom Hartman Institute, have been putting forth this powerful and powerless narrative at the same time, which probably Israelis feel. And certainly we're very powerful. Brett Stevens, op-ed like Jews should embrace our power, and even if the masses turn against us, will the elite still back us? And the important people, which could also be a scary trend here in the U.S. Sacrificing the opinions of the masses. But I mean, how do you feel about this mixed signals of power and virtue?
It's kind of been like the motto of the Israeli right for so long. It's that we need to show through strength. That's the only way to teach them. And interestingly, it seems like many Palestinians feel the same about us. The only way to get us to change our ways is not through conversation, negotiation, and normalization, but rather through resistance, armed resistance, and strength. It's the only way to teach the Zionists, and we feel the same about them. I think if we look historically at how conflicts are solved, often they're solved by one side totally dominating the other side. So those are instances in which strength certainly does solve conflicts, but I think that there's a lack of imagination and of what another approach can look like. And I think I think we're actually wired to generally seek a more violent approach, but we live in a world where we can all communicate with one another. We're more evolved, like cognitively, than we were historically. And just because strength and domination has been the way to win in the past, it doesn't mean it needs to moving forward. Like I think that the idea of negotiation and finding common ground is certainly should be our first attempt, our first approach. But it seems like there's all too strong a tendency to just lead to violence and strength. And I think Middle Eastern culture, and I'm not only saying this is like Arab culture, but also like Jewish Israelis, they very much are in that mindset that strength is the way forward. And it's a shame, and I think it's why we are where we are. I don't know if that fully answers your question, but that is my take on those.
Well, the conflicting narrative in the West, and I mean, God forbid, a disturbing trend I've noticed is that there's almost no like cross-cultural pro-Israel rallies. Almost all the Israeli rallies are basically all Jews. Even like University of Michigan had a parents, and like maybe 1,000 people came, but I would say like 75% of them were Jews. Most of the events in my area are in synagogues. Maybe they include like a few politicians or public leaders, as where the Palestinian rallies get bigger and bigger. And it was making the counterpoint of, in the West, it's the virtue signal. So Jews in the West are not giving the power narrative. We're generally giving that we're the more moral side, we're the better side, or even the victim narrative. You're saying like, well, God forbid, hundreds of thousands of people are marching in the street and chanting things that could be considered genocidal. Like, we need to be protected. So it was this counter signaling or conflict in signals coming from Israel and coming from pro-Israel voices, or you're just Jews in general in America.
Right. Yeah. I guess to be effective at convincing the masses, you want to fit your narrative based on who you're talking to. I think Palestinians are probably doing something similar, right? On one hand, they're playing the victim narrative, and I mean, they've been constantly been on the worst end of every wave of violence between us. But they also do show this whole thing of like, we are strong, we're powerful, we defeated them on October 7th, and we're defeating them now in Gaza, right? So I don't know if there's much of a difference. I feel like it's just seems to be an overall effective strategy, different messages for different groups of people.
Do you think anyone in the West, I mean, God forbid, everyone on the pro-Palestinian side, there's no one who's really defending Hamas, beyond like a little bit of, minimal, I don't even know what to say, but
I'm seeing a fair bit
That is
of
actually
Hamas.
not true.
I mean, Rashida
fair
Tlaib is
bit.
my congresswoman here, and like, okay, from the river to the sea, but it's like generally there's very few people defending Hamas and the use of violence.
I've seen a lot of different, talk shows and like interviews with pro-Palestinian people, and a lot of them don't condemn Hamas. They don't want to say it out loud. They don't want to, they're afraid that if they say that they don't condemn Hamas, people would be mad at them, and if they do condemn Hamas, it would be untruthful, because I think a lot of people do not condemn Hamas.
Well, that could be in terms of, you put it to like, well, do you condemn Hamas? And people might refuse to, but they're just the general.
No, I mean, not condemning Hamas is not acceptable, like, in the modern society, because what they did is so awful. But if they really what they feel, a lot of people they do condemn. They don't condemn it.
Yeah, I've seen some pretty big accounts on Twitter that have gotten a lot of support for saying they refuse to condemn Hamas or even praise Hamas. We've seen university professors do it. I don't know if it's that fringe. I think many people view Hamas as this inspiring group of freedom fighters that are fighting a settler colonial project like that. That's really how they're looking at it. So why wouldn't they praise it if that's their worldview? So.
Yeah, they're calling it resistance, which, in my opinion, it's the far opposite. But whatever.
It's just hard for the narrative in America to, relatively to make us, even Israel, the weaker party here. So even if people support Hamas, even to, like Rashida Tlaib, just with the facts on the ground, that you're just like saying, God forbid, the guy who was killed in. We don't know what happened in California, but that was one of the few cases where there was actually a counter protest. But to come out with an Israeli counter protest, I mean, the narrative is slipping, and it's hard to see it coming back to just trying to convince people that, like, Hamas or all these people support Hamas, and if they do, like, God forbid, like all these hundreds of thousands of people marching in the street are doing it because they hate Jews secretly or something like that. It's a really tough narrative to put forward or defend.
Let's give it over to Joseph. Joseph, what's on your mind?
So I'll address like a few things you guys were talking about. But first, I wanted to ask what you think the likelihood, because I don't know if I'm probably not the only one noticing the pattern. I'm pretty sure a lot of people notice the pattern that Israel tends to get attacked on holidays like Yom Kippur, anniversaries, Yom Kippur War, that type of stuff. And I know what your position is, that, the secular world is probably more unbiased, and like we have to kind of leave the religion to the side because it really hasn't availed as much. It's created a lot of the problems. But as far as like people, in just in the world in general, it's very mixed. So there's a lot of secular people. There's a lot of, agnostics, atheists, very religious people, Islamic, Jewish, Christian Zionist, non-Christian Zionist, anti-Zionist, both Jews and Christians. There's so many people involved in this, and it's just not simple at all. We know that. So what I'm asking is, what do you think the likelihood of a further attack religiously centered, considering that Hamas does have religious materials in their charter. Like this seems to be motivated by religion, whether or not the Palestinian people are on board with that. The actual average Palestinian citizen may not be fundamentalist Islamic. However, the state-run system seems to be very Islamic. Just the same thing as it's probably the opposite in Israel, where the secular democratic government and citizens, but there are many religious Zionists also who are cheering this thing on.
Cool. Yeah. Real quick, we'll bring Connor on. Connor, welcome to the chat as well. So Hamas is definitely is a religious organization as well, right? And they're not shy about that. I don't know if that is what really informs their decision to attack on religious holidays. I think, it's more so strategic. Yom Kippur, you have everyone, not everyone, but a significant portion of the population is fasting. They're resting, they're low energy. So it's a strategic day to attack.
It's also half of the soldiers get back home because it's like a half full shift. Like
Right. Yeah. There's less
so the army
soldiers
is
on
less
call. Yeah.
strong.
Exactly. I think that comes more from a strategic perspective, but there is no denying that that Hamas is is an Islamic organization as well. They don't pretend to be like a secular nationalist Palestinian like entity. They say they're religious. Does that help? Probably not. No, but if we expand out to the Middle East, it's not. Like Saddam Hussein was a secular nationalist. Is he better than Hamas? I don't know. Is Assad a secular nationalist better than Hamas? Gaddafi, secular nationalist, right? So I don't know how big of a difference it really makes. But generally speaking, I think if you no, I don't even want to go and say that. I say like whether you're religious and you justify harming others because the holy texts say so, or there's some secular ideology that allows you to do that, it's not religion or secularism that's the problem. It's really dogmatic beliefs and you know justifying wrongdoing based in some dogmatic belief. And if you look at the history of the world, this has been done not only through religion but also through secular means. It could be communism, right? It could be Christian crusades. It could be jihad. It's just endless. People seem to latch onto stories, as Yuval Noah Harari described it in *Sapiens* as the imagined order. They're kind of these fictions that unify us, and even when you strip away religion, people generally latch onto something new. So it's
I
more
think
so about finding the set of beliefs that are that unify us, that bring us together, that cherishes all human life, like secular humanism, for example, which is one that I generally subscribe to.
Can I maybe answer a question I saw in the comments?
Yeah, I saw you got a question. Yeah, let's bring it up real quick. Justino's asking Romy Romy, do you think Palestinians have a right to resist? And do you recognize that Palestinians are being killed by extremists and the military in the West Bank?
Okay, so first of all, we have to separate Gaza and the West Bank, two different places. They're not actually connected physically. If we're talking about Gaza and the Palestinians in Gaza, they do have the right to resist, of course. But what happened on October 7th is not resistance in any way, shape, or form. It's just a brutal, I want to kill all the Jews I can see right now. It's not fighting against the military. It's not going to the front and, fighting like an actual war. It's more, just targeting civilians. If they were actually wanting to resist, first of all, you can say that they don't have to resist first. They can they can have peaceful negotiations before they try to kill 1,400 civilians. But that's another subject that can be controversial. But in my opinion, killing civilians is not the first thing that they should do. And they strategically hide their rocket launching spots inside, civilian areas. So when we try to fight back, we end up killing civilians, even though we tell them to evacuate, even though, you know, we give them a 24-hour notice most of the time. And if they actually if they cared about their civilians, to be honest, they would fight in the front. They would target the military and they wouldn't spend all of their money that they got from donations and all the pipes that we got them and all the, technology that we give them. They wouldn't make from all of it. They wouldn't make rockets and ammunition. They would give it to their citizens. So we can see that they actually don't care about their citizens. And this isn't about resistance. This is about killing Jews, as their original charter says, So this can be controversial in a lot of ways. People don't like to hear that. People like to hear that it's resistance. But in my opinion, it's just, that's not the way to go. That's not.
Thanks, Romy. Connor, what's up? What's on your mind?
Hey, what's going on, Adar? What's going on, everybody? I'm really just here to learn as much as possible. But really what's on my mind is, I'm here in Philadelphia. I'm right outside Philadelphia right now, but I'm here in Philadelphia, and reacting to stuff in America I feel like there's a lot of rising incidents of anti-Semitism all across America. We just heard Dovid mentioned that there was a Jewish man who was some sort of situation was killed in Los Angeles. Apparently in Montreal, there was a synagogue that had some kind of Molotov or something thrown at it. And just all sorts of different incidents coming about, and just really disheartening to see that. And of course, I'm reacting to everything I'm hearing over from Gaza and Israel, but thinking about the stuff happening in my own backyard is what's on my mind the most, and it's really disheartening to see all that.
Yeah, definitely challenging times. Thanks for sharing that. It's unfortunate that every time that there is some kind of wave of violence in Israel, that Jews around the world are punished for Israel's decisions, and whether you feel like Israel's decisions are justified or not, Jews around the world don't deserve any blame or punishment for that. And ironically, those indiscriminately attacking Jews are actually just justifying Zionism, right? The whole idea is that Israel is a place where a haven for Jews, and here we see that Jews will be indiscriminately attacked because of the actions of a government on the other side of the world. That just makes the case for Zionism, which is interesting. And it really goes back to a prior point that those often on opposing sides are fuel to each other's fire. So I think this is just a clear example of that.
Can I add something?
Sure, yeah.
When I first heard about what happened on October 7th, I was like, first of all, that's horrible and everything. I was like, maybe finally people will understand that it's all about anti-Semitism. It's all about, people hating Jews. And then no one actually cared about it. And it really broke my heart. They targeted civilians, literally, and just in order to kill Jews. And then people are like, no, it was resistance. It was, all that stuff. And what you're saying is completely true. It's, it's showing why Zionism is so important. But then on the other hand, people don't care if Jews die, a lot of them. And it's really hard to fight against that.
Kind of unfortunate. I think me and Adar had this argument the first time more about the alt-right and this question whether the main cause of anti-Semitism is Jewish behavior. And God forbid, it seems like consensus among Jews that Jewish behavior has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. And among the masses, I would say it's probably the opposite. Most people think that the rise in anti-Semitism is directly related to Jewish behavior. And you could say a form of collective punishment. Even in the U.S., that most people think that it's the U.S. that's the main supporter of Israel and the actions that are happening in Israel. And there's multiple causes to why the U.S. is supporting Israel. But clearly, you got like Blinken coming to Israel, backing Netanyahu, and saying he comes not only as the Secretary of State, but as a Jew, with the implication that he's helping Israel because he's a Jew. And also the question, I mean, besides the anti-Semitism aspect, is to say, well, is it just a matter of sides, not morality? That I'm on the side of Israel and the Jews, whether we're right or wrong. Like, I'm a Jew, that's my team. Even if we were wrong, even if we were immoral, I would still be on the side of my team. But I mean, I don't know if Adar, you fully reject that rising anti-Semitism is basically related to Jewish behavior, or you think it's some sort of irrational hatred, propaganda?
Well, no, I mean, I think, all forms of hate are generally connected to attributes a certain group have that are found undesirable by others. But I think that once you have this idea about a group in your head, you start to see it more. So if you look at the world through Jew tinted glasses, you're going to see the Jew everywhere. So let me just give you an example. Jews are overrepresented in many industries of influence, and this is a lot of the grievance anti-Semites have with Jews, right? We're overrepresented in Hollywood, in media, in finance, in politics. These are all industries that can influence culture and society, right? So you see Jews there. If you have this notion that there's something inherently wrong with Jews and that they're supremacists and want to control the goyim, then you're going to be very sensitive to this idea. So it's not as simple as it's on one hand connected to attributes you don't like in a group, but a lot of it is just a framework in which you're seeing things. So you read the Talmud, there's Jewish supremacist texts in there, and there's certainly Jews who are supremacists. But all these Jews that are overrepresented in these positions of power are generally secular. Many of them are atheists, and they don't hold supremacist views. So really, all they're doing there is connecting dots that shouldn't be connected. They see some supremacist text, see Jews that are overrepresented, and then they conclude that these Jews are supremacists and they have influence, so they're using their influence to control the masses. But if you have like a really healthier framework, you would say, okay, let's say Jews are overrepresented in media. They're still not the majority of media. And let's say all the Jews tomorrow were to leave media. Would they be replaced by people with vastly different views than them? No, they would be replaced by liberals who have a certain worldview. So the problem isn't so much the Jew. Let's say you're a right-wing anti-Semite. It's not the Jew like you think. You just struggle with a certain ideology that is prevalent in positions of power. But that's more your issues with liberalism. You just attribute it to Judaism, right? So there's flaws in how they see things, which if we could break these down, it would help people overcome anti-Semitism. So yeah, I'm not going to say that they don't have grievance with certain undesirable attributes that a group has, but it's not as simple as Jews acting a certain way, therefore they're hated.
Well, if you just focus on the war, I
Hmm?
mean, like, okay, Rashida Tlaib is my congresswoman, and they put out that like 70.
Real quick, David. I see you're in the waiting room. Either turn your camera on or put a thumbnail on, and then we'll bring you on.
Like 71% of people in Michigan Democratic Party support ceasefire now, and the thing, like, well, Rashida Tlaib is the only one in the Michigan Congress that's in step with the actual Democratic Party. And you're looking, this is, so to say, an unpopular war, at least in the Democratic Party, but the administration is supporting it. And even if it's just one Jew, and Blinken's only a half Jew from his father, but he says he's doing it because he's Jewish, and he went there to Israel. And there's a lot of reports, even the New York Times, that he's ignoring warnings from the State Department. And you say, well, it's wrong to blame the Jews, but then you see, well, the Jews are really pressuring and pushing, if you want to say, support for this war, not to have a ceasefire. Is it reasonable? I mean, I would say reasonable, but just say, well, rising anti-Semitism, at least in this case related to the war, is clearly very much related to your Jewish behavior. And if you do want to stop the war, anti-Semitism might be a good group strategy on the right, like issues like abortion or cultural issues, immigration. Anti-Semitism is typically a strategy, but here in terms of foreign policy, where the foreign policy is out of step, is anti-Semitism, so to say, I'm going to say illegitimate, but what do you do if you're a Democrat and your party is out of step with the majority who want to force a ceasefire?
Yeah, I would actually agree with you. It's hard to see a situation where the backlash Rashida Tlaib is getting isn't net negative for Jewish sentiment around the world. You know, one of the main claims against us is that we have disproportionate power, and we use that power to silence and punish those who speak against us. And then when you see Rashida Tlaib get censored for comments, which, you know, if she were to make equal comments about any other country, the reaction would not be the same. When we see that to be the case, people then see that and they conclude, you see, these are just Jews using their power to silence those who speak against them, and that fuels anti-Semitism. I agree with you completely. Or also, we're seeing like certain like free speech laws being passed in Florida and stuff that you can't say certain things. All of this does not help Israel's cause and does not only fuels anti-Semitism. I agree with that completely.
Can I jump in real quick? Because
just one last idea. We should be able to win the war of ideas based on the merit of our ideas, not by using power to silence those we disagree with. And this is true across the board. If you're confident in what you in your idea, win the war of ideas on its merit. Hey, I'm bringing you on. Yeah, Joseph, what's up?
Yep, I got to take off in a few minutes, but so yeah, I absolutely agree that that hatred does come out of ignorance and lack of communication. And, you know, for instance, like you mentioned, the Talmud and Jewish supremacy and people's fears have to do with that. Like, you know, I as even you know, being raised Christian, I've actually been doing Daf Yomi for the last 3.5 years, and a lot of the things that have been said about Jews based off of some of that ignorance, you know, I've dispelled with a lot of that fear, just by kind of spending my time there. Now, you know, I don't subscribe to everything the Talmud says. I'm pretty sure that there are some supremacist things in there, and I've seen some pretty things. Like, yeah, modern world does not subscribe to any of that. However, just to have the dialogue, you know, I'm a part of a weekly fellowship. Boston College has a Christian and Jewish fellowship. So like just having the discussion like we're having right now, having platforms like this, I think it's really run, but the power, the lust for power really, I think, comes from the fear, and the fear comes from ignorance. And so having that conversation and spending the time with each other, aside from the political conundrums, just to understand one another, whether we're secular, whether we're religious, I think that does a great deal of help towards what we're trying to work for.
Agreed. So you're off, Joseph?
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, man. Much appreciated. Hey, what's going on?
Hi. Good evening or good morning to everyone. I don't have much time, but I just wanted to comment on a few things, although I don't have much time. So, first of all, I just wanted to say a few things about what Romy said. And I think that's like, it's a very problematic issue when it comes to describing the conflict, that this is a religious conflict, which is not. And of course, I can argue for that if that's not clear. The issue is not because a group is Jewish and a group is not Jewish. However, there is an element of Jewish supremacy that is embedded in the Israeli policy. And of course, you have to take into consideration the military occupation of the Palestinian people. And I believe that Palestinians don't see Israelis as enemy just because they're Jewish. That's a very simplistic and even ignorant way to describe it. It's so whether they were Jewish or Hindu or Christian or whatever, that does not change the fact that they are people under occupation. And by that, if we need any kind of solution, it needs to be political. That's one thing. And again, I'm just glazing over what was said. The second thing is that when Romy said that, yes, she agrees that Palestinian people have the right to resist. However, my question would be, how are they supposed to resist? What is the right way for Palestinians to resist? And of course, the easy answer that anyone can say here on the panel or on the chat would be, peaceful resistance. And I'm not sure what peaceful resistance means, since the Israeli government doesn't even allow even activists to do anything. Even peaceful marches, for example, are suppressed. Posts on social media can get you in prison. Boycotting products, which is a fundamental right to any individual in any democratic state, is considered forbidden and demonized. And the third thing I wanted to say, so just to conclude this point, there is really no legitimate way for Palestinians to resist, if you think about it, from the Israeli perspective. So whatever Palestinians do, they're doing it the wrong way. And no one is saying, oh, you should sit and negotiate. Well, they did. And they signed the Oslo Accords. And the very simple thing that the Israeli government needed to commit to is not to expand its settlements. And they never did. They never stopped. So that's one simple thing. And that's one simple and major thing. And it has been going on for the last 30 years. So negotiations did not work. It's not because they want to be violent, it's because negotiations are not working. No one is taking Palestinians seriously. No one is hearing Palestinians. And that's why many people around the world say, well, things didn't just start in October 7th, because Palestinians have been ignored throughout the conflict, throughout the years and years of conflict, they have been ignored. And the last point I want to say is about anti-Semitism. And I know this is a very sensitive subject, but I do believe that the Israeli government is not really doing a good job in preventing anti-Semitism, in the sense, and hear me out and be open-minded, that when the Israeli government poses itself as a representative of the Jewish people and does all kinds of things against Palestinians, whether it's occupation or segregation, or right now, the bombing of Gaza, the indiscriminate bombing of Gaza, it's only, and I'm not justifying anti-Semitism, it's only natural that people would have this kind of anger towards Jewish people. And let me add another point, that the Israeli government systematically works on suppressing Jewish voices who call for peace, who call for ceasefire. And we even see how the Israeli government is dealing with the families of the hostages. They're being beaten in the street just because they're asking, just cease the fire, because it's not helping, our family members or our loved ones be back safely. So the Israeli government itself, I feel that they don't really care about, Jewish lives. If you think about it, and when it presents itself as, well, I am the only person, or I'm the only entity that represents every single Jewish person in the world, anyone who's angry at the Israeli government will take their anger at any Jewish person. And of course, it's wrong, it's disgusting, and it's ignorant. And not everyone makes that distinction between a Jewish person and the Israeli government, or an Israeli, or someone who is Zionist and someone who's not Zionist. And I feel that they're like, for example, when Jewish people protested throughout the United States and said, "Not in our name," you know, we barely saw that on the media. It's like, why are you suppressing Jewish people who are calling for peace, who are standing by the Palestinians who are being killed? What you're doing is showing that every single Jewish person in the entire world just wants to kill babies. So I think it's very counterproductive to the issue of anti-Semitism. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not Jewish, although I do understand the fear that Jewish people must feel. But you also need to understand that October 7th has been a very horrible day for the Israelis. And yes, it was, the most lives lost since the Holocaust. But you also need to understand that Palestinians have been feeling this kind of pain almost on a daily basis for years, and no one has been talking about it, and especially not on a governmental level, meaning none of the major states are standing by the Palestinian people. And that's why you see this difference, that you see the people are of all kinds of backgrounds and religions. They're the ones who are taking the streets to be the voice of Palestinians, because basically the Palestinians don't have a voice, while Israelis have, backing of governments, not only morally, but also financially. And the most disastrous part is the excessive military support, and none of the states is actually saying, okay, the problem is clear, let's do a political solution to the Palestinians so we can stop the cycle of violence. But I believe this is just another scheme by Netanyahu. He wants to stay in power. He doesn't want.
If I may chime in, just because you're making a lot of points, and I want to be able to respond, but it's going to be nearly impossible just with how much you said. I very much appreciate your perspective and you bringing this up, and I hope you stay on with us. But let me just give some remarks of what you said so far. First of all, I'll start with the end. I think that I'm not in disagreement with you that Israel's actions has fueled global anti-Semitism. I think there's a very strong case to be made that that's true. In terms of Palestinian resistance, this is challenging, and I'll start by talking about why Israel has made it so hard for Palestinians to resist. Because on one hand, they're constantly saying, resist but don't be violent, and then when there's a peaceful means of resistance, they find a way to shut that down or say it's anti-Semitic. BDS being a clear example of that. If Israel and Israelis are so against violent resistance, then they should actually be okay with BDS because it's a form of nonviolent resistance. So I agree with you there. In terms of what Palestinians can actually do, what form of resistance they can do that is effective. So first of all, it comes down to having a goal that is achievable. I think one of the biggest mistakes in Palestinian resistance has been the goal is not to improve their conditions. It hasn't been for them to have a state. It's been for the dismantling of the state of Israel. And again, there's varying voices in Palestinian society, but a significant portion, primarily for most of history, it's been the majority of the Palestinian population. Their activism has been dismantling the state of Israel. This is a non-starter for Israel, for Jews living in Israel. So it doesn't matter if your resistance is violent or peaceful. This is not going to achieve the results you want it to. So one is about having an attainable goal. For example, Palestinian citizens of Israel can do all sorts of means of protest to improve their conditions within Israel, to repeal the nation state law. Palestinians who aren't citizens of Israel can do a whole lot to ensure that they have some form of self-determination over part of the land. But as long as the goal is dismantling Israel, their efforts are essentially wasted. Now, you mentioned Oslo. So there's always been an expansionist part of Israeli society from the early Zionists. It's always about how can we have as much of the land as possible. This, thankfully, is not the motivation of the majority of Jewish Israelis. The majority of Jewish Israelis don't have in their mind the idea of expansion. For them, it's all about security and self-preservation. The expansionists and those on the Palestinian side who are resisting violently are best friends of one another, because the way that expansion has constantly been justified has been through security means. The larger our land, the more secure we can be. So what we need is for Palestinians to work have attainable goals, work through nonviolent means, and work with the Israelis who are not expansionists, who are the majority, who just care about their security and their self-preservation. And this is an alliance that actually could change the nature of the conflict. Now, for example, you mentioned Oslo. Oslo was signed. Israel didn't build new settlements, they expanded existing settlements. Palestinian response to that, or just the response to Oslo in general, which was involved recognizing Israel's existence, was to actually go into civilian populations, go into buses and do suicide bombings. Like, to think that that's a reasonable response to expanding a settlement, instead of doing some kind of protest around that settlement, but to actually go into Israel proper, go on a bus and blow up women and children, like, we could still recognize, even though Israel has had this expansionist sector that has always had some influence over policy, that's not a helpful response. That's a response that it will always harm Palestinians more than it will help them. And if we look at other movements, the American Civil Rights Movement, fighting colonialism in India, apartheid, there were violence in all of these, but the primary means of resistance were not violent. And they were interestingly successful. It's, the second a population is violent, it's much easier to justify violence against them. When their primary means is nonviolent and they're calling out violence amongst their society, the justification and the public support for violence against that population will naturally diminish, and Jews will naturally feel more safe living side by side with Palestinian neighbors. So I'm not saying there's a clear and easy means of resistance for Palestinians, but it's very clear that the primary, I don't know if you could hear those explosions. I'm close to the Lebanese border and we get explosions all day long, but the primary means of resistance and the energy around it and the support from a lot of the international community has been, yes, violence is the way, this is okay, this is justified, rather than really, Palestinians rising up and proving to the world how brilliant they could be in the resistance and nonviolent means, just like Gandhi did, just like Nelson Mandela did, just like Martin Luther King Jr. did. That would actually be far more effective, would not give Israelis the justification to be violent towards Palestinians, would make Israelis feel much safer, and we would make a lot more progress. So much Palestinian oppression comes from the need for Jews to feel safe, right? So Jewish security comes at the expense of Palestinian freedom. So the most effective means of activism are Jews feeling safe. So again, there's no easy solution, but this is the way we should be looking at it if we really want to make progress. And feel free to respond. I'm going to bring on some more people. You did mention Romy. We have Romy back. We have Zohar here. Damn, this is a full house. We have Justin here, and we have Alan. Okay. So I'll let you respond if you have anything you want to say. We'll then give it to Romy because you did mention Romy's name. And then we're going to do Justin, Zohar, and Alan. Let's do this.
Should I respond now?
Well, if you're on mute, but feel free to respond if you'd like to. And if not, Romy, all you. All right, so I think A is not on for now. Duba, if you want to come on, either turn your video on or give us a thumbnail for the aesthetic. Yeah, Romy, what's up?
Okay, so I also agree with you about the peaceful protests. They're far more effective. Also, they would actually make Israelis feel more safe with the Palestinians. About what A said is, she said that, like, that's their only way to resist, using violence, because any other way is being shut down. But I want to like if we think about what they did on October 7th, they didn't just kill 14,000 people. They slaughtered in the most heinous way possible. Like I saw too many videos to even think it's not real, but people, I don't want to specify what happened in the videos that I've seen, but things that they're not resistance, they're just torturing civilians, and it's not resistance in my opinion. And people can argue about that, but I don't see how it's resistance. And I think Israel gave the Gaza to the Palestinians in 2005, and Hamas was established in 2007, I think. And their goal was to kill Jews. It wasn't to build a country for themselves, like you said, Adar. It wasn't to build a strong military to defend themselves, or to stand against Israel in a war kind of way. It was to shoot rockets at civilians. They don't see whoever, the rockets don't differentiate between peaceful people and between people who want to kill them, and between Arabs, Israelis, and Jewish Israelis. And it's just, I don't think that's resistance. That's what I have to say about that.
Thanks, Romy. Justin, we're going to give it to you. And Duba, I see you're in the waiting room, but you're going to need your camera on or to put on a thumbnail. We're thumbnail supremacists in this chat, so no coming on without a thumbnail.
Hey, everybody.
And what's up? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I mean, it can. There's definitely people will agree that the loss of innocent lives, whether it's through resistance or through defense, is something that's unfortunate. It's interesting. Tal today tweeted the statistics of the people killed. Some people made claims that most of the people that were killed were soldiers, and I think he said something. It was like 69% of those killed were actually civilians, and then the rest were actual soldiers.
What percent?
I believe it was like 69, 70%.
Yeah.
And I responded to him because I said, well, if you look at the 10,000 plus that have died in Gaza, 4,000 were children, and then women was another percentage. Basically, it came to the same thing. So it's kind of in response to Romy, and I think Romy is a good representation of the typical Israeli, like 25 and younger, maybe even 30 younger. I mean, in fact, I think she's a typical Israeli with her opinion that this is not resistance. And maybe, and one of the things that she said that, I'm an Israeli, I can go out and see the world. Yes, that's a good point, because Gazans can't. Gazans live in a siege. Traveling from Gaza outside is a very task. I just helped a person go to the university in Netherlands, and I don't want to tell you what we had to do to get him out of Gaza, like what we had to pay to go through Egypt and do all this other stuff. So it's a different reality. And the fact is that when you're comparing the loss of civilians' lives, and then it brought back the issue of credibility and anti-Semitism. And I hate to say this, But the people who are denying what happened on October 7th are starting to be more right than the people who claimed what happened. You know, because when you watch videos of David Shapiro, or is his name Ben Shapiro? I'm sorry, Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro and all these other news about what happened on October 7th about the 40 babies and the rape in front of their moms and this in front of their parents, and the husbands had to watch their wives be raped. And we're finding most of that was fabricated. A lot of it was fabricated. This not only does, you know, because remember, I lived in the era during the Gulf War about the weapons of mass destructions that supposedly Saddam Hussein had, that he was supporting Al-Qaeda, he was behind 9/11. The same people who said that were the ones promoting these stories. The president of the United States said 40 babies. And this roots credibility. And now you have what appears to be Israel and pro-Zionist forces trying to draw America into a war with Iran. This is how they see it. Okay, I'm not a Jewish person, so I can see it from the outside. Now, we in the United States or wherever country you're from, you say we got into this war with Iraq because of weapons of mass destruction. We lost thousands of people. The Middle East is in turmoil, and all for what? For lies. Now, here we are again, 2023. We have our most powerful ships in the Mediterranean. Weapons pointed at Iran. Why? Because of these non-credible stories that are coming out of Israel. So this is a fuel, because if the right-wing Americans that you hear them, this is what they're saying. They're basically saying the Jews are going to drag us into another world war. And who do I blame? I blame them because they need a conspiracy. They, you know, hey, conspiracy fuels anti-Semitism. They want to be anti-Semitic. But at the same time, Israel is playing that, just like they play the evangelical Christians. They play with these people. They benefit from these people, and then they cry when it spills over and hurts innocent Jews. So Israel needs to do a better stand at saying, we don't associate with this. This is because when they lie, people die. Okay? So I differ with you, Adar, because you say that most Palestinian resistance is based on dismantling Israel. And I want to say that during the Intifada, for example, the Intifada was a non-violent, you know, rock throwing, the first Intifada. It was predominantly marches, civil rights marches, and it was met with brute military force. It was met with thousands of people being killed. It was met with more brutal occupation. And it proved that no matter what kind of resistance. Now, why do I hide my identity here? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Do you know?
Most
Do you think I'm scared? Do you think I'm scared of the Palestinian Authority?
No, I mean, from my experience, most Palestinians hide their identity because they get backlash from their own communities. But I didn't make an assumption of why you do that.
Let me tell you why I am here. Because I have family members, when they get to the Ben Gurion airport, they are asked for their cell phones. They are asked, let me see your Facebook account. Let me see your Twitter. And if one little statement about BDS or something, I'm sorry, no entry for you. Please leave the country right now. This is a Palestinian whose whole family is from Jerusalem, who with homes in Jerusalem. So does Rami know this? Do you know this happens to us? So even us, people who support nonviolence, people who work and cooperate with Israeli organizations, we are not even safe on our own land. We're told, get out of the country. Family members of mine were arrested at the airport and given 2 days to leave the country. This is what we live through. So even people who support nonviolence, this is what we go through. And you say Israel's not an expansionist. Most Israelis are not expansionists. You know why October 7th happened? Did it happen because Hamas wanted to kill Jews? Do you really believe that? Is this the whole purpose of Palestinian resistance, to kill Jews? Guess what? Here's some news for you. Even if you were Hindu, even if you were Buddhist, we would resist you. It's not Jewish. It's because you're occupying our land. It's because you displaced our people. This is why we resist. The fact that you're Jewish is just secondary for us. Okay? And if Israel is not an expansionist state, why was your border of Gaza not protected? It wasn't because it was the holidays. It's because settlements where 800 people live, where 1,000 people live, have thousands of soldiers protecting them. Your soldiers are protecting Ben Gavir and Smotrich in the West Bank. They're not protecting the border between Lebanon or Gaza. And the big elephant in the room is Netanyahu. Netanyahu, for the last decade, has followed a policy: let's keep Hamas strong with Qatari money. Meanwhile, let's dismantle the Palestinian Authority. Let's make it weak. Therefore, you won't have a unified Palestinian people. There's nobody to negotiate with. And this is the reason why people like me are pissed off, because Israelis are blaming and killing tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians because of a failed Netanyahu plan, and because Israelis, rather than look eternal at their faults, their issues, let's just kill tens of thousands of Palestinians because they're the problem. No, the problem is Netanyahu. The problem is a peace process that is based on one thing: continuing Jewish supremacy over the land, making sure that Palestinians, no matter what, at the end, are going to live under the foot of Israel and be second-class citizens. It's a question of equality, and it's a question of how do Jews maintain as much power as possible and supreme over the land. And everything that frustrates me is that nobody is able to see that the suffering and killing of the Palestinians that's going on in the West Bank right now at the hands of extremist settlers, that's been going on. Hundreds have been killed. And this is like, oh, no, well, it's a fringe group. No, this is a group that's backed up by the army. This is a group that gets funded from the government. Their roads, their electricity is all supplied by the government. This is the problem.
Cool. Thank you, Justin. Real quick, you just made one comment that I want to point out. You said, and it's really not the main point, but it's sitting on me. You said, because you're not Jewish, you could see it from the outside perspective. So I'm just not okay with that comment because it's attributing an inability for a certain ethnic group to see something clearly, but you're Palestinian.
It was meant to mean that, like, for example, like, I
any
see that
individual,
sometimes you're looking at it as a point as this is something that's happening to us. It's part of the anti-Semitism that's been lingering since Europe.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I understand where it's coming from. It's just
not
important
that you're incapable of it, but
I actually, if we look in, and this is kind of a side note, but if we look at, what's been the mainstream social justice movement these days, which is known as woke social justice, or that's how many people describe it as wokeness, they have this idea that you could only understand a cause if you are connected to it, right? So only a Jew can understand anti-Semitism. Only a Muslim can understand Islamophobia. I actually think that's entirely wrong. I think sometimes taking a step back gives you a clearer perspective. Sometimes when you're involved personally, you're too emotional and you can't have a rational approach. So there's a sentiment there that I agree with. I just don't think we should generalize a group of people and their ability to see a conflict, because
but what we're seeing, Adar, is that the Palestinian resistance movement was not founded on anti-Semitism. It was founded, because let me tell you something.
I don't disagree with that.
But the thing is that that's what we're getting thrown into all the time. We're always being thrown into, oh, it's because you guys want to kill all the Jews. Oh, you guys want to throw all the Jews in the sea, blah, blah, blah. Palestinian resistance, the ethnic cleansing that was put on the Palestinians happened since the 1890s. They were talking about it. And this has been a resistance movement. And had you been British, had you been Christian or Buddhist, it would have been the same response.
I would.
And people like Rami, who's saying that, oh, you guys just want to go out and kill out Jews. This is not the case. This is not the case. We are a resisting and settler occupation, a settlers movement that came and displaced us off our land.
The Hamas literally states that they want to kill Jews. And I agree with a lot of things you said just now, and I really feel your pain. But you can't dismiss the part that they say they want to kill Jews.
Yeah, but Hamas, like I said, Hamas has their own movement. But like I said, Palestinian resistance movement has been around since the 40s.
But the Palestinian Authority, I'm talking now about the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. They have a policy where if you kill Israelis, Jews, you get money for that. Like, how is that not targeting Jews?
Let me try to make some sense out of this, because it's actually quite complicated. Okay. It's true that if Israel were to cease to exist and Palestine would be free from the river to the sea, there wouldn't be an attempt for Palestinians to go across the world and try to still target Jews, right? It would end there. I think we could say that with fair confidence. It's not like they have this
attempt. About that. Just want to say.
Okay. Well,
so you think Palestinians want to go to Europe and America and just start killing Jews? That's what you believe, Roman?
Not Palestinians, but people who support pro-Palestine. Yeah,
there are a lot of
before the establishment of the Jewish country, Arabs have killed Jews. In my opinion,
so let me, Romy, please let me finish, because I think we'll try to make sense out of this. I think it's fair to say that Palestinian grievance is not with all Jews; it's with Jews living on the land. It's with the Jewish state. I think that generally, when you're in conflict with a group of people, you begin to have negative sentiment against them. So if you actually look at a polling, the Middle East is extremely anti-Semitic. And Palestinians are the most anti-Semitic out of any other population in the Middle East. But that's not surprising. They've been in conflict with the Jews for 100 years. And with that, Israel is one of the most Islamophobic states in the world because they've been in conflict with Muslims for the past 100 years. So it's almost impossible to disconnect to expect a group of people to not have hate for the people they've been fighting for 100 years. But I do think it is a fair statement that Jewish Israelis are not hated solely because they're Jewish. It's because the Jewish state existing on Palestinian land is something that Palestinians refuse to accept. So while there is an anti-Semitism problem amongst Palestinian society and in the Middle East, that's not the core of the conflict. It's two distinct populations, both with national aspirations on the same piece of land, unable to reach a compromise for how we share this land, and that spills over and fuels hatred of our respective religions. And Justin, I agree with a lot of what you said about the challenges Palestinians face, and what you said about Netanyahu and how even peaceful resistance movements have been shut down. But I also, and again, this is one of my number one critiques for both Jews and Palestinians, is that there's often very little self-reflection. So, you spoke now for 10 minutes and you said all the things Israel did wrong, but I don't think I've ever heard you say something that you think Palestinians could do better. And this is something that I think is essential for all of us to do. It's not only what is the other side doing wrong.
You must have never read all my comments on the server.
No,
if you go to the server, you'll see me. I have plenty to say about the Arab nations and about our reflections.
This is only based on our conversations here, but I think it goes a long way. When Jews see Palestinians be self-reflective and call out their own people, it actually starts to build trust. It's like, okay, they're not just blaming us; they're trying to work on their own thing. So that's just a point of feedback that I think would be important.
But Adar, you mentioned specifically about the resistance and stuff, and I can name you 10 organizations that have been shut down. Their offices have been closed down. People have been imprisoned, and these are organizations that are not violent. They're for women's rights. They're for like Medicare, medical rights. Legal like al-haq, for example, things like that. So I'm telling you, is they have military response to non-violence. It's treated the same, whether I'm carrying a gun or a picket sign. I am treated the same.
For every act of non-violent resistance in the history of this conflict, there have been 10 to 100 acts of violent resistance. So it's true, there has been nonviolent resistance, but the primary energy has been violent means, and it's been justified by the majority of the Palestinian population and by activists around the world. Just another reflection on the American Civil Rights Movement. One of the most powerful instances in the American Civil Rights Movement was the march to Montgomery. Is that what it was called? It's Martin Luther King, led by many other activists. They marched, and when they met the police on a bridge, they were beaten, and this was filmed and publicized, and just the visual of a peaceful movement being beaten, it really helped increase the national sympathy for the civil rights movement, because they saw this attempt to do something peacefully that was met with the violence. So just because peaceful resistance is met with violence, that's not a reason to become violent. That is more the reason to continue these nonviolent means, and we've seen it be effective in other struggles. The sympathy for the Palestinian cause would be so much greater if you didn't have massacres happening, if you didn't have buses blowing up, right? So again, it's true that nonviolent means have been targeted by Israel, and sometimes violently. But that to me is just not an excuse to say, oh, you know what, we tried, let's go blow up a bus, or let's massacre civilians. I think, again, we're too quick to justify violent resistance and see it as the only approach and say,
do you think the most Palestinian resistance is blowing up buses? I mean, come on.
No, I think the majority
and I think that would be most Israeli offensive, like killing innocent Palestinians. Yeah, I mean, do you want to compare civilians? I mean, to say that Palestinian resistance has been we're frustrated, we're going to go blow up some buses and stuff.
The primary means of Palestinian resistance has been violent, and when there's violence,
that's not true. That's not true.
I mean,
Most Palestinian resistance has
Look at
not
the
been
numbers.
violent.
wait,
Yeah,
Justin,
look at the
Justin,
number of civilians. Sure, look at the number of civilians killed.
If we
Justin,
look at the number of
Romy, real quick. You could create a list of all the Palestinians who have really led nonviolent resistance movement, and then create a list of every Palestinian that's engaged in violence. These lists are not even comparable. Okay, these are worlds apart. We could talk about which side's killed more civilians. More Palestinian civilians have died, but that's not the point we're making. Self-reflection and understanding that even though nonviolent means haven't been so effective, it's still been a tiny fraction of the energy around resistance. There's been a culture of violent resistance that is not condemned by Palestinian society. It doesn't mean Palestinians aren't against it, but often when Palestinians speak out against it, they're then attacked by their neighbors, not always physically attacked, but verbally attacked or isolated. So again, we could just shrug it off and be like, oh, we tried, so violence is the only approach. But I don't accept that. I think self-reflection amongst Palestinians, and again, I say this to Jews as well, but self-reflection amongst Palestinians for what means of resistance would be more effective would go a very long way. And to say we tried nonviolence, it didn't work, so violence is the only option, I just don't buy that. And it's one of the reasons we're still in the situation we're in, and why Palestinians continue to get the worst end of the deal, because violence is met with more violence. Israel's powerful, by far more powerful. This country was built on the notion of never again. So an attempt to do it all over again is going to be met with brutality, and that's just the reality. And I'm not even making the case. I'm not. Yeah, Zara, we'll get you in a moment. I'm not even saying that Palestinians don't have a right to violent resistance. I care less about what they have a right to do. I'm more interested in what's effective. I want to see us solve this conflict. I want to see Palestinians be free. I want to see them be able to self-determine on this land. I don't like the bloodshed. It pains me. So for me, it's simply coming from a place of effectiveness and pragmatism, not even what they have the right to do. So this is really what's driving me. And I think more Palestinians were to really have this conversation, then they could really change the face of the conflict and be much more effective in their attempt for self-determination. And Zara, feel free to chime in, and Justin, you could also respond. But Zara's been waiting.
Justin, if you just give me a second, please.
Go ahead, Zohar. Of course, always.
Cheers. Thank you. Thank you, Adar, and everyone for those nice words. I just want to add a little bit in the spirit of self-reflection about what we might be doing as Israelis. And again,
we love self-reflection on this channel, so.
Oh, that's good.
In the meantime, we're bringing Dubba and Palestinian on. We'll give you guys an opportunity to speak soon. Yeah, Zohar, all you.
Thank you. So, one, I think Ronnie, hi Ronnie, I didn't meet you before, but I'm not sure that she's up to date with the history of Hamas and how did it come to be and who has helped found it in the Gaza Strip, or what was it founded for. But it was Israel's creation primarily in order to weaken the PLO in the late 80s. It was a policy priority of Israel to favor Hamas. As Smotrich says, they're an asset, a neches, against the Palestinian Authority, because they are asking for a state. Now, this ask for a state is supposed to block the expansion of new illegal settlements, which is exactly the aspiration and the main motivation of Smotrich and the rest of the extreme right-wing parties. And because they wanted to continue building settlements that do not add to any kind of security to any Israelis in any kind of shape or form, neither the soldiers or the settlers living there. This unfortunately brought us to the state where we are now. Now, there's no way in the world that justifies what happened on October 7th, and the attack was horrible and it's disastrous. And I'm asking Adar in the same level. We just received a blow of violence. Do you think that the retribution blow of violence, as you said, will help the Israeli cause? Would it help people be more sympathetic of our cause and our persecution around the world of what's happening now? Because By the looks of it, we're losing support with every person dying in Gaza right now because we are responding to violence with violence. So, in the spirit of self-reflection, I don't think that there was a time in our lives, in the history of Israel's existence, that we have responded to any type of violence with not extreme further violence, that if only exasperated this whole situation and just kept us going in this whole circle of violence that just never ends. And because it is us, Israelis, who hold most of the guns, and it's us who are a nuclear power with immense capabilities and the backing of the world's largest military superpower, I think it is upon us to try to make the call to remove violent means as form of responding to our quote-unquote enemies. Thank you. Oh, one last point on the question of nonviolent self-resistance. Since we are such big supporters of nonviolent self-resistance, where do we stand on BDS?
So I want to give Romy the floor just because I just spoke a lot, but I mentioned earlier that I think Israel made a huge mistake and Jews around the world made a huge mistake calling out BDS because this is an attempt for nonviolent resistance, and shutting this down, shutting down BDS only helps fuel violent resistance. Anytime Israel shuts down nonviolent resistance, they're just fueling violent resistance, and that's clear. And that's
can we apply nonviolence to the Israelis as well, to the army? Why don't they practice nonviolence?
Oh, I mean, I think they should. Let's be clear about something. I constantly say that the single best thing Palestinians can do to progress their cause is to actually accept Israel's right to exist. But I think Israel has made that nearly impossible to do by being the villain to the Palestinians instead of making it seen as a legitimate entity. I think the way Palestinians currently view Israel, and I'm not talking about like cognitively. I don't want people to try to make these comparisons. It's how they feel when they think of Israel is not so different for how Jews feel about Nazis. I think it's actually comparable in how they feel about Israel is how we feel about Nazis. So the best thing Israel could do to get Palestinians to accept Israel's right to exist is to change Israel so it can be accepted by Palestinians. And we need to have a major reckoning and reflection on that and how that can be done. And it's major failure on our part, without a doubt.
Because let me ask you the reason why. I'm sorry, Zohar. Is the reason I'm asking this is that nonviolence. Imagine all the sympathy, most of the sympathy that Israel received after October 7th has gone. Because why? Because the civilians that were killed. So countries, and even in the Arab world, the first news that were coming out of the Arab world was, how could they do this? You see, there was actual sympathy. But guess what? There is no sympathy. It's hard to cry because of 1,400 people when 10,000 people have been killed. What's happening in Gaza? 1.6 million people are now homeless in Gaza. That's 70% of the population. So why don't you practice? What if the reflection was, let's reflect and see why this happened. Let's reflect and see that our government policy brought about this. Let's reflect that our support for our army is sitting protecting settlements rather than our borders. This self-reflection, this non-violence is not seen. And you're asking Palestinians who are being attacked daily. You know, in Palestine right now, it's harvest season.
Justin, I'm actually asking both, and anyone who watches the live.
Well, I'm asking Romy because she seemed to like the nonviolence. She wants the nonviolence resistance. But why don't you practice?
We're gonna let Romy speak, but I also want us to be just a little bit more kind to Romy. It's she's coming on here, voicing her opinion. There's been a lot of people
some of the claims she made were just like, she's making claims about babies and stuff. Come on, I'm being very nice.
That's fine.
What claims have I made about babies?
Real quick, Romy, you might not like the claim, but her ability to hear what you have to say will increase if you engage with her in a way that's respectful. So just keep that in mind. Romy, all you.
First of all, I've listened to everything you said, and I agree with a lot of it. I am the first to say that I don't like Netanyahu. I don't like how, the government has been acting. I think the government has been acting, the more the government causes Palestinian to be more violent because they shut down peaceful things, the more the Israelis become more right wing and want, because they don't feel secure and they want, Israel to be more expanding and to have more power. And I think I agree with Zohar on a lot of things too. I may have come off as like, anti-Palestinian or something. I'm totally not. I'm the first one to like, self-reflect, and I'm thanking you for like teaching me a lot of things that maybe I've not learned, because I'm also sucked in Israeli propaganda as much as the next person who lives here. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. But I agree with Adar that, out of, 100 protests, most of them were violent, in my opinion. I don't know, like, that's what I've been seeing since I've been born,
If I may just chime in really
Wait,
quickly.
Zohar, it's just we have a lot of people who haven't spoken yet, so I really want to give them the opportunity. But we will get back to you. Romeo, are you done with your point?
No, I just want to finish and say a lot of people I know sympathize with the Palestinians and do not condone the government. And I feel like a lot of Palestinians don't know that and think, every Israeli is bad. So I just want to speak on behalf of most of the people I know. But since October 7th, there has been an increase in people I know who just now don't want to listen to anything the Palestinian side has to say because of the losses that we've had.
It certainly did radicalize us, and our actions now in Gaza are further radicalizing the Palestinians. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Alan, we're going to give it to you, but real quick, Floodland, thank you so much for the super chat. And David just joined as a member. David, thank you so much for the support. If anyone else wants to join, you can see how to do that. Either you click the join button or look in the description for more options. Thank you. Alan, all you. And Duba, get yourself a damn thumbnail.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make a few quick points before I get to my main point. Number one, when you said that Israel rejected nonviolent resistance like BDS, it is totally okay, in my opinion, to push back a nonviolent resistance. Just because the resistance is nonviolent doesn't mean you have to acquiesce to it. So I totally disagree that somehow it's wrong to disagree with someone just because they're being nonviolent. I mean, there's a lot of disagreement on this channel today, and we're not being violent. So I don't see that as a problem. Number two, as someone was actually the other guy said that the first Intifada was nonviolent. As someone who was actually a soldier back then, and who had colleagues where a Molotov cocktail just missed their Jeep. No, the first Intifada was very violent. It wasn't as violent as the others because they didn't have guns back then, but they tried their best to be as violent as possible. So that was not nonviolent resistance. Number three, before I get to my main point, is I had a question for you last time we spoke, Adar, which was years ago, and I posed this question to the panel as a whole. And the question goes like this: if you were the Prime Minister of Israel, and if you had a supermajority, something that's never existed, I know, in Israel history, let's say you had 670 seats in the Knesset, what would you do to make peace that's never been tried before? Okay? Because I want to see somebody try to answer that question. And if you can't, then you're basically saying that Israel is not at fault here. So I posed the question to you. My main point is this: what I want to talk to you about is to try to get away from the micro and look at the macro. And one thing, to understand the Middle East as a whole, we have to understand the Middle East makes up about 5% of the Earth's population. Do you know what percentage of American military exports go to the Middle East? The last few years it's been down because of Ukraine, so it's down to about 41. Normally it's in the high 40s. Nearly half of American military exports go to the Middle East. That's a tenfold what it should be. And it's not just the United States, it's also Britain, France, Spain, Germany, Russia, China. everybody sells weapons to the Middle East. So when people say, oh, we can't understand why there's no peace, well, that's the reason there's no peace, is that war is very profitable. And and getting back to the United States, everyone, of course, believes that the United States is on Israel's side. I'm going to disagree with that, crazy as it sounds, because of the American military export that goes to the Middle East, about 7% go to Israel. All right, so 93% go to the Arab countries. So unless someone can prove to me that 7 is greater than 93, the United States has changed sides in the struggle. Now, of course, they'll never say it, and of course they they like to sell weapons to Israel as well. But Israel in the Middle East, is, from a weapons perspective, is more of a competitor than a buyer. And so that's why they've changed struggle. They changed sides. Some of the countries, for example, Egypt. Egypt is the third largest arms importer in the world, right? Think of how poor a country Egypt. Egypt should not be buying tanks and planes. They need schools and hospitals and infrastructure. So to me, that's the real micro why there's no peace in the Middle East. Now you say, how does that pertain to the Palestinians? Well, the way it does is obviously they don't sell weapons to the United States to the Palestinians, even though some people in the United States I've heard people online say that they should, but that's how they demonize Israel. And in my opinion, they definitely demonize Israel. I mean, Israel is held to standards that other countries are not. I've never heard, in the Ukraine-Russian struggle, people talk about civilian casualties or proportionality. They'll never talk about those things. No one talked about civilian deaths when the United States went into Iraq. So that's what I think it is. And to me, that's the elephant in the room. And you can talk about the elephant in the room, or you can talk about the mouse in the room. But we have to realize that who the real enemy is, and it's not the Israelis or the Palestinians or whoever. It's the reason that somebody wants there to be a fight in the Middle East, and the fight justifies the sale of weapons. So if you really want to make peace in the Middle East, that's what we have to shout about. It's not about who's right, whether it's Israel or the Palestinians. You got to stop. You got to call out the world powers for selling weapons into the Middle East.
Thanks, Alan. I appreciate that perspective. Zohar, I saw you wanted to respond, so I'll give it to you in a moment. Palestinian, who was just on the chat, I saw you chimed off, but maybe come back on. I wanted to hear from you. And Duba, I'm just waiting for you to put on a thumbnail, and then I'll add you on stage. I'll just make one remark about challenging BDS. Just because something is nonviolent doesn't mean we can't disagree with it. I agree completely. But our way of disagreeing with it was to try to ban it from college campuses, call it anti-Semitic, call people engaging in it anti-Semites. That's not the same as challenging it on its merit. I think if we disagree with something, let's say why we disagree with it. Here, we're just trying to shut it down outright, and that's not the right approach. And you asked a great question. I think it's a very important question to ask. What could Israel actually do to create peace on the land? But I think an equally important question is, if we don't like violent resistance and we don't like BDS, what can we have Palestinians do as a form of resistance to improve their situation? And I'll give it to Zohar, and then Alan, you could respond. Duba, I'm bringing you on. Good to see you, Duba.
Hey guys.
All right, thanks, Adar. Yeah, actually, no, you just said what I wanted to say about challenging the BDS movement or the nonviolent resistance movement of Palestinians. Yes, this was not actually an effort to try to debate the cause, but to try to shut it down and to label anyone who engages with it as a rabid anti-Semite. Apart from that, what I wanted to mention earlier was, I forget. Oh, never mind. To someone else, I lost my train of thought.
All good. Alan, do you have something you want to respond? If not, I'd like to give it to Duba, who's been waiting for quite some time.
Really, I think we look at the macro. I mean, how did BDS come up? It's forget my language. It's a bullshit thing to begin with. No one's going to boycott Israel. I'm actually for BDS. I hope that all the people who hate Israel would boycott all of Israel's technology and they could go back to the 1970s. So I'm very much for BDS for certain people, for anyone who wants to do it. I think BDS is just nonsense that was thrown out there, so that it's a nonsensical issue that was thrown out by people who want us to fight one another.
So you just don't think it's effective? And let me build on that, because both Noam Chomsky and Norman Finkelstein, who are some of the most vocal critics of Israel, also spoke out against BDS, and it was something along the lines of their intention or their goal not being stated or realistic. Norman Finkelstein said because they're not saying what they actually want, and it seems like many of those in BDS, their intention is to dismantle all of Israel and not fight for a two-state solution. It's not going to be effective. So some of Israel's most avid critiques have shared similar criticism of BDS because of its lack of intended goal. Zohar, all you.
Yes, sorry.
And Duba, you're up.
Want to remember. Alan, again, something you said about the amount of military expenditure in the Middle East. The Middle East is also where 30% of the global reserves of oil are found. And I think a lot of the wars that we saw around this region was a lot about getting access to oil and transporting it successfully to wherever it is large companies were interested, that they had most of the backing of both American and British armies. Now, that aside, BDS, as Adar mentioned, it was previously criticized by Finkelstein, who called it a cult because they did not specify exactly what was their policy about Israel. I visited the BDS site just recently out of curiosity to see what they're about, and their call is for Israel to respect international law and go back to the pre-1967 borders. So within this line,
that's an evolution, by the way. That's new.
Yeah, probably. Again, the PLO had a new charter. The Hamas had a new charter where they said that their fight is not with Jews but with Zionists and the like. There are movements that evolve, I guess, and it's our question whether we choose to trust them or not. We know that our military evolves from a para-terrorist organization. So, yay, evolution.
Hey, Adar, also, if I might mention, also, there's some Palestinians who are against BDS. Like me, for example, I'm not necessarily for BDS, and I'll tell you why. Because with family based in Jerusalem in the West Bank, I feel that we have to study BDS because it might hurt Palestinians almost as bad as it would hurt Israel. So this is another perspective. I don't like the fact that the Palestinian economy is linked to Israel. I think Zach Foster has an article about how 72% of the income that comes into Palestinian economy, it might be aid, I don't remember, but it's actually benefits Israel more than it benefits the Palestinians. So I would think that anyone who supports BDS would have to look at it. How is it going to affect the lives of the Palestinians? Because it might actually hurt them. So we might be hurting the people that we're trying to help. But at the same time, I don't like the way that it's being criminalized, because we're actually being told that you might, in the United States, I think some states, it's actually a criminal, and I think in Germany as well, you are a criminal if you support BDS, and that's a problem.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, you mentioned on BDS, I mean, I would say BDS is...
David, real quick, I know you haven't spoken for a while, but Duba's really been waiting a long time, so Duba will speak, and David will give it to you. And real quick, we have a comment from Jeremy Finkelstein saying, cousin Norman has been blacklisted from the rest of the family. Jeremy, are you actually related to him? That's kind of cool. Duba, what's up?
Hey guys, how are you doing? Yeah, I'm calling in from the European Jerusalem. You hear me?
Yeah.
Oh,
are you
know where is the European Jerusalem?
Are you intentionally not showing your face?
No, I'm just I just had like oral operation, so
okay.
I'm not very nice to see. And
okay, well,
yeah,
can I guess?
So I prepare.
Can I guess European Jerusalem? Is it Sarajevo?
Yeah, man.
Okay, I'm good at history.
Share more about what that is.
Yeah, Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And yeah, a bit sorry. I'm also very emotional, so my voice may be sounding a bit like trema, but yeah. First of all, I want to thank you, Adar, because I think the show is great. Sulha is great. I've
Thank
been
you.
following for at least 2 years now, but sporadically, of course. Every time there is a connotation about Israel-Palestine conflict. Yeah, which I don't think it is actually a conflict. One, the most powerful army in the world against like throw stoning, living in a glass house Palestinians. Yeah, so I will really try to be very brief and swift. I have, I would say, one statement and 2-3 questions, if you may. So yeah, statement would be that as perhaps as you know, Sarajevo was one of the only places where mostly Sephardic Jews had a place to go and to be saved, as much as in Palestine, which was also under Ottoman occupation, I would say. I mean, I come from Bosnia and I speak about Ottoman occupation because I think that the Ottomans were, I mean, of course, they brought a lot of good things, but still, it was an occupation. And for example, they would like to whitewash the Armenian genocide by, making the cause for Srebrenica and the Srebrenica genocide. If you maybe remember, we also said at that time, we have to say, for example, not anymore shall this never happen again, and it happens again. So I have also many friends who are Jewish who emigrated to Israel, and many who came back, and many who are Zionist, anti-Zionist, but most are Zionist, which I found very sad. But those who are anti-Zionist actually told me a few things, so I would maybe make a connection first by saying that he had to cut his finger off in front of Israeli army, so they leave him in peace because he came from a war to serve in another army, and he refused, and they didn't want to let him do any kind of civic rights like refuseniks, and that was back then in the 90s, of course, and maybe changed now, but back then my friend had to cut off his finger. So they leave him, so he can still have the Israeli citizenship, but not go to the army. I mean, he explained me many things, and yeah, I'm not really biased. I like I say, my friends are Jewish. I mean, we have very beautiful synagogues that were never attacked, and if we go by the logic of Ronnie, that all the Muslims will now attack Jews, please explain me how, since 500 years, churches, mosques, and synagogues didn't burn unless it was from outside. Like, for example, Eugene of Savoy, one of the archdukes back then from the Austrian crown, he set on fire the whole city, and he burned also the synagogues as well as the mosques, but we rebuilt them all. So yeah, that would be maybe one of my first statements. And a question to Adar. When you say Palestinians should protest more peacefully, make some protests, etc. I would not go too much into depth. I would just suggest for you guys, if you didn't see the movie, 6 Broken Cameras, I think it's called. I think you're gonna change all your minds when you see it, because it's not staged, it's real life. And please watch this movie if you can. Then another question.
What's the movie about?
Just look it up. I mean, it's about a guy who is peacefully protesting, and the 6 broken cameras, it's like his 6 physically broken cameras by Israeli army. Would it be by canisters or by bullets or whatever?
5 broken cameras. I just
5, bro. Yeah. Sorry if I maybe exaggerated.
It's on Netflix. I saw it on Netflix.
Okay, so just another question, 2 questions, and I will leave. I mean, I will still be there, but leave the place for someone else. If somebody can explain me one thing, I'm really, really curious. If the West Bank or the Samaria and Judea is the heartland of Israel, why didn't Israel create there and leave Tel Aviv and I don't know other places and West Jerusalem to the Palestinians? Why now, after so many years, we have to go to Jerusalem, but we are not even religious, but we want to have this. I don't say they are not religious Jews, but do you understand my point? Like, I'm really.
Well, so
can I answer that?
But just one more question. I will stop. And when you say ethnic and Jewish, I mean, I am Muslim, for example. And I cannot say that Mecca and Medina are the heartland. I mean, it is religiously, but it's not, I'm not Saudi because of that, because I'm Muslim.
Right.
How can Jews be a nation? It's impossible. Yeah. I mean, there is not any religion in the world who calls themselves nations. I mean,
so Duba, it's a
thank
good
you
question.
Very much.
I appreciate your perspective, and it's a good question to ask. But by following the question by saying it's impossible means you already have reached a conclusion. I would say ask the question, wait for an answer, and then reach your conclusion. But Alan, feel free to respond to the first question, and I'll take the second question.
Okay, the first question, I do want to explain it, because the problem that a lot of people have with the Arab-Israeli or Israeli-Palestinian conflict is people don't know the facts. They don't know the facts of history. Now, it's easy to say the Jews came there and stole the land, but that's simply not the case. The Jews came there and bought the land. And the land that they bought initially was the shit land, the crap land, chol v'bitzot. That means sand and swamp. Sand is the sea, right? The swamp is the swamp north of Lake Kinneret. So the land that the Jews bought was land that Arabs didn't live on and didn't want to live on. It's not historic Judea or Israel, or the kingdom of Judea or Israel. So the Jews lived there. Now, was there any land stolen from the Palestinians? The people were there during in 1948 and 67. Yes, I'm not going to deny that, but a lot more land. And I don't want to do this aboutism, but it was that Jews who 99.5% of the Jewish population who live in Arab countries were also displaced. My mother's family was one of them. So there's a lot of wrongdoing, and when I hear the word Nakba, it drives me crazy, because in the 1940s, so many people in Europe and India, Pakistan were displaced, and the Jews from the Arab world were displaced, the Jews of Europe were displaced, and no one just became this eternal refugee. People went on with their lives. So that's my answer to your question, is the reason the Jews don't live in Judea and Samaria is because originally they bought the land, but the chol v'bitzot, the sand and the swamp.
Wait, but there were Jews living prior to that in the West Bank.
Oh yeah, there's always been Jews.
So it's not about the Jews were coming. Like Jews were already there. It's simply that Jews began coming in masses. It's normal to understand.
Let me build on that and also push back a little bit. First of all, my family moved to Hebron in 1812, right? So this was like 100 years before the Zionist movement, and then they lived in Hebron, which is Judea and Samaria. But when the Zionist movement began, the Jews came and took anything they could get. It's not like they had an opportunity to just all move to Judea and Samaria, buy that land, and make it their nation. If they could, they would. It's that there weren't many options. As Alan said, they bought land. Now, often, like, the Zionist narrative is we bought land, we did it legally, it's perfectly okay. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. The land was technically owned by Ottoman landowners, but you had Palestinians living there for generations. So you could say that what we did was legal, but you could certainly raise the ethics of buying land and displacing populations off that land. And the way Ottomans got ownership of that land is also a little bit sketchy. So I don't think I think just saying it was legal doesn't really acknowledge the morality behind it, and the fact that Palestinians very well can rightfully see that as an injustice to get displaced after living on a land for many generations. And even though there was a lot of displacement in the 40s, Palestinians very much have a right to remember their displacement, especially when they are still yearning to return to the land and have a homeland of their own. The same way Jews for thousands of years yearn to return to the land of Israel, Palestinians have a right to want to return to Palestine and live in a nation called Palestine where they can self-determine. Just because other nations were displaced doesn't mean Palestinians can't mourn their loss and fight to have it returned. So I think it's important to understand this if we really want to understand the grievances of the Palestinians.
Can I say something
Sure.
there?
Yeah.
You made an interesting statement there. I wish we lived in a world where Palestinians or anybody in the Arab world would be free to speak their mind and that have freedom of speech, freedom of press, and freedom of being able to elect their own government. So, but you cannot, and no one can speak for the Palestinians until they're free. And when I say freedom, I'm not talking about free from Israel. I'm talking about freedom, the basic freedoms that people in the West enjoy. You can't say that they have a yearning to return to the land. I don't know if that's true or not.
Why not? I've spoken to hundreds of Palestinians.
Yeah, what's our whole purpose?
Okay.
We could
Yeah,
just
and each one told you exactly what you want to hear.
Alan, I have family in South America. I have family in North America. I have family all over the Middle East. We want to go back home. There's no question about that.
Then
so my point, but okay, and you said something interesting I want to touch base on. The Arabs caused the Jews to leave Iraq and stuff like that. Palestinians are not responsible for whatever happened to Jews in Iraq or Morocco. Just like
okay, so you're saying the Arabs are divided?
No, I'm saying that we're not one unit. Are you? Hey, listen, if a Spanish speaker from Guatemala and one from Argentina, are they the same in your book?
Well, I don't know. I did see a poll 2 years ago.
No, I'm asking you a question. Just because I speak Arabic, am I Iraqi or am I Moroccan? Is it the same thing?
It's like I live in California. Am I a New Yorker? No, but it's still one country.
But we're not one country. We've never been one country.
So
Morocco and Palestinians are the same. Moroccan and Algerians are the same.
They can't even speak the same language.
So a Guatemalan and an Argentinian are the same.
Guatemalan
and an Argentinian are the same. They speak the same language. They're predominantly Christian. Are they the same?
Look, your language, your religion, your culture is the same. You're the same people.
Really?
I know it's not, yeah.
Oh my goodness! Because
I know when you want to take the one.
Listen. I've lived in the Gulf. I've traveled to Turkey and to Greece. And let me tell you something. I felt more at home at Greece than I did in Dubai. Okay, so
that's good. That's good that you felt that way.
Because you don't understand. Because you guys, you are as part of the Israeli people that want to marginalize us. Like, go to your other 32 countries or 24 countries or something like that. Hey, I got to go to New York. Go to New York.
That? I live in Los Angeles. I live in California.
Well, even better. Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's de-escalate.
This is the whole notion that Israelis, like the other day, some Israeli told me, go to Tunisia. It's a beautiful country. Okay, let me go steal Tunisian land because you stole my land. That's a perfect solution.
No. You don't have to steal someone's land.
Someone kicked me out of my house. I'm going to go kick somebody else out of their house. And guess what?
Yeah,
let's wipe everything the slate clean.
Can I talk?
Crazy.
Yeah. Alan, speak, and then I'm going to share some thoughts. We're going to try to reconcile this, and then we're going to move on to the next topic.
You have immigrants in every country. They buy land. They live peacefully. In the Arab world, whether you like to admit or not, the Jews did buy the land. And in the Arab world, the last 100 years or so, there's been an ethnic cleansing, not the BS Palestinian ethnic cleansing where the population's quadrupled, but an ethnic cleansing of non-Muslims. Okay, it's that way. One group fought back, and that's the Jews. Okay, we didn't let you ethnically cleanse us from the Middle East. I'm sorry.
So you is we're responsible. Palestinians are responsible for Farhud. Palestinians are responsible for what happened in Morocco. and in Iraq.
No. But
Oh,
they're
but they should just be
responsible.
Yeah,
made to
but
They
pay
don't.
for it.
No,
this is also a
they're
good question. Come on, guys.
Wait, no, yeah. Guys,
Come
we're
on,
doing.
come on. Hey.
Alan.
No, this
Listen,
is
What?
listen.
this is
That
Red's
is now the
perspective. Is
question.
everybody should pay?
Why?
Everybody should pay for the crimes
Just
except
then,
us. This is their perspective.
you spoke. Alan spoke. We're
Can
already.
I say just one thing and I'll be quiet?
One quick point, and then we're moving on. Yeah.
Okay, I've noticed no one's answered my question. What would you do if you were the Prime Minister of Israel? What do you do to make peace that hasn't already been tried?
We didn't get there, but I don't think
I don't think you can answer.
No.
We can answer it, but
wait,
you don't want to
wait.
hear it.
No, you can answer it. Go ahead.
Okay.
It hasn't been tried.
Let
Okay.
Zohar will answer. He's better at it.
Okay. Actually, Alan, if you watched enough streams, I actually often say what Israel could try and could do differently. So it's not true that no one can answer it. But back to this point, because the whole Nakba denialism or trying to just discredit or minimalize it. First of all, on your point of the entire Middle East is one nation, I mean, that's just not true. It is true that the entire Middle East has been Arabized. So there's some Arab culture. They speak Arabic and they have, their writing is the Arabic language. But if you actually look at the dialect they speak, Moroccans and Palestinians can't speak Arabic with one another. It's so different. They can't even speak the same language. Culturally, they're different. They speak different language. They eat different food. They have different customs. And genetically, they're different. You look at their DNA, they're different. So we could look at the Arabization and say, oh, they're all one people. But that's just, it's an unsophisticated way to look
I could say the same exact thing about the United States, what you just said. Are you saying the United States isn't one country?
But the Middle East is made up of many different countries.
On purpose. The colonial powers divided the Middle East because they didn't want one Arab country.
Okay, but the United States, you don't have one people. You have a multi-ethnicity. You can't say a Chinese American is the same as a Mexican American.
Still one country.
Justin, please for a moment. Okay. Just the fact that colonial powers, carved up borders, that's a reality. This doesn't speak to legitimate Palestinian grievances who were living on the land, had aspirations for their own state, got displaced, and you say it's a bullshit ethnic cleansing. No, it's not. It's true the Palestinian population quadrupled since the creation of the State of Israel, but the populations have moved. So if you look at the amount of the populations where they've been living, there's been massive displacement. Hundreds of villages were destroyed. Palestinians were never allowed to return, and to call that just bullshit, claim. I mean, that's just it's intellectually dishonest.
Listen, guys.
It does absolutely nothing to try to reconcile, because the more you delegitimize the struggle of the other, the more they will delegitimize your struggle. That's exactly what this is. And when Palestinians say, when they engage in atrocity denial and Holocaust denial and try to discredit any legitimacy we have or any claim we have to this land, you just fuel that with your rhetoric by delegitimizing them. Voices of delegitimization are fan the flames of delegitimization of the other side. So you're just engaging in that. That's exactly what you're doing.
I find it, and you find it, very offensive that you take a people who've had the history of the Jews and you compare that with a people who really didn't exist until the 1960s.
Okay. Thank you. You just made case closed. Case closed.
Not case closed.
That's not
it's
true.
Not paid.
Okay, I'm in San Francisco and I have a bridge I want to sell you. You want to buy it?
Yeah.
I think you already did.
This cannot be the same. This cannot be the same, because the Jews who were in Arab countries, they didn't have to emigrate before things began to happen. But this is for some other Sulha episode, maybe Adar, to talk about why the Jews were expelled from Arab countries and who was behind. Maybe Sacha Baron Cohen, spy, Mossadi, We know everything. Come on. I mean, you can play it till tomorrow about this. Is not. This is a conspiracy fact, man. You know, there is difference between fact and fiction. You know, fiction is something when you out of thin air produce, but there are facts. And come on, this is for some other episode. This is for some other episode. This is for some other episode, not now.
Yeah, fine.
Adar, do you agree?
Show me the proof and I'll believe it.
Adar, do you agree this is for another episode?
Fine.
Why the Jews were expelled from Arab countries. And then we will see what happened.
All you need to do is
enough Hasbara. We don't hate Jews, but we hate Hasbara. Nobody hates the Jews. We hate Hasbara and Hasbara like.
Listen, can I talk? I hate Hasbara too because
nobody hates Jews, and you can see that on every single.
Duba, I'm muting you because you're just trying to speak over me. Let Alan speak. We heard your point. Let Alan speak, and then we're going to move on.
Okay. Real quick, I hate Hasbara too. I don't think the Jews need to explain themselves. Israel's a very moral country, even though it bothers people I say that. And two, Adar, I do watch your episodes, and no, I've never heard an answer to that question of what would you do and anybody on the panel can answer this. What would you do if you were prime minister with 70 seats in the Knesset? What would you do to make peace that's never been done before? I've not heard an answer yet.
Okay, well, I've spoken on it on multiple episodes.
Never heard it.
Okay, so maybe let's push this topic aside. I do want to answer Duba's last question, and then people on the panel can answer that question, and then we're going to wrap it up.
But the accusation that Palestinians didn't exist into the 1960s, I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
That's really serious.
Let's speak on that real quick. So we start to see beginning of Palestinian nationalism even in the late 1800s. After World War I is when the concept of the nation state started becoming popularized. So you did have these Palestinian villages, and they didn't refer to this. Most didn't refer to themselves as Palestinian then. That's true, but you began to have this solidarity of these different Palestinian groups unifying to have a nation of their own, because that's when countries all around the world started emerging and having nations of their own. So it's not that Palestinian nationalism just came out of the blue. It was part of a more global trend. And you know who else was in on that trend? The Zionists. They're like, okay, there's this concept of a nation state. Let's try to create our own nation state. This was the clash. Two distinct populations wanting to create a nation state on the same piece of land. It's true that over the years, Palestinian nationalism strengthened. They even rebranded, right, with their flag and calling themselves Palestinian. That's fine. That is literally a legitimate tactic to achieve their goal of having a nation state. But it wasn't out of the blue. And we could go on to say that one of the reasons why Palestinians unified was against the common enemy, which is the Zionists. But this is true about any group of people. Anytime you have a common enemy, it just strengthens Jews. One of the reasons why there's a global Jewish unity is because of anti-Semites. So I don't think there's anything unique or ridiculous about that. Palestinian nationalism began in the late 1800s, and which was part of a global trend of national movements all around the world, and was only strengthened over time through the struggle against Zionists. I mean, that shouldn't even be controversial. I mean, that's history.
It's very controversial.
I mean, it shouldn't be. I understand because part of the pro-Israel narrative is that it's made up people and a made up movement.
It's me. It's leaders of Palestinian.
Yeah, you're referring to a few quotes that are cherry picked and taken out of context. And you say you're against. But this is typical Hasbara, and that's really what you're engaging in. Well, the Yasser Arafat.
Like I said, I don't feel that I need to explain Israel.
Okay, fair.
You know, I have relatives that went to South America in the early 1900s, even before the creation of Israel. And the ones that ended up in Chile participated in the founding of a soccer club. It's still alive right now, and it's called Club Palestino Deportivo. Okay? Where did the name come from? Did they just invent it? It came in 1929. So if you feel I mean, what I'm saying is that the Palestinian was around, but I mean, to say that it came from the 1960s is ridiculous, but that's okay.
No,
Yeah,
I'm saying that
long
the Arab people are a long, historic, proud people. The Arab people are that.
So the Palestinian American Congress that existed in the 20s,
Are you an Arab or
labor
are you a
unions.
Palestinian?
I'm a Palestinian. I speak Arabic.
So you're not
but
an
yeah,
Arab. You're not an
I
Arab.
mean, ethnically, yeah, we can say we're Arabic, but not the same as Iraq. We have different. I like you said, Adar told you, we have different DNAs.
Okay, well, people in Mississippi,
Okay,
I'm sure,
different.
have different DNA
Anyways,
too.
we're if you want, we could dedicate a longer
Yeah,
segment.
but I'm gonna just say something that we're focusing on the history and who's this and this. My point is, right now in Gaza, there's a bloodbath going on. There's a massacre going on, and I want
none of us know.
And I want
none
to
of us
say right
know-
now, just before I go, I want to say something right now that what we should be focusing on is ceasefire now. Stop the killing. The killing
And
that's
then
going
what?
on in Gaza, the killing that's going on in Gaza right now, the innocent people that are being killed that had nothing to do with anything that happened on October 7th. This does not justify what's going on in Gaza right now, the displacements of the people and the massacre. And you think that this is going to change anything for Israel, bring security to Israel? A friend of mine who lost a family member said it. If my brother being killed can bring about peace, then I want to lose my brother. I'm okay with losing my brother, but it's not. So if you want to say that this war, this slaughter, this displacement of more than half the population of Gaza is going to bring about peace, it's not. And this is why we need a ceasefire now. Not because it's wrong, not because it's unjustified to kill these people, tens of thousands of people and displaced people. Nothing justifies what happened to them. They don't deserve it. Even the attacks of October 7th, which I will say, were terrible, but it didn't justify this war. And we need a ceasefire now. And anyone who says that this war is justified and makes an excuse for this war is seriously not interested in peace.
Can I respond?
Yeah, very briefly, and then we're done, and then we're moving on.
Okay, just real quick. Ceasefire now leaves Hamas in place, which means ceasefire now means a future war. That's number one. Number two, none of us know what's going on the ground in Gaza. Do I believe the civilian casualties are that high? I do not. And the reason is, I'll give you a quick explanation. One thing we all believe, I'm sure, is that Israel has spies or operatives inside Gaza. Hamas does not know who those spies are. Therefore, they're probably not going to allow that many civilians that they're not sure of, unless they're family members, near their positions. So I don't know. None of us know what's going on in Gaza. So I'm not going to accept Hamas is saying 10,000 civilians have died. Maybe it's true. I seriously doubt it. Okay, that's what I have to say.
Okay.
What you really believe that Hamas says this, not the Palestinian national authority?
No, I mean these are reports from the Gaza Ministry of Health, which is a Hamas organization. There are NGOs.
Yeah, but they were legally elected. I mean, aren't they?
Yeah, 17 years.
Wait,
yeah,
real quick.
And since then there were no elections. Why? Because they didn't want, or somebody else imposed.
You know,
because they didn't want.
Guys, we're not going to bring up new. We're not going to bring.
This is the same kind of people that talk about like how many Jews were killed in the Holocaust. How many? You still have thousands of Palestinians who are missing underneath the buildings and stuff. So the number is
How do you know? How do you know?
Guys,
because I have people in Gaza. I have people in Gaza.
We're
okay. In fact, the ministry.
I'm muting both of you guys because I don't like needing to speak over people. We're wrapping this up.
Thank you.
We're gonna touch on two more points, okay? And everyone will have an opportunity to speak. And if you guys want to come on for another segment where we could focus on this, then we will. But you asked the question, and I think a lot of people are unclear about it, so I do want to answer it. You said, how can a religion be an ethnic group? It doesn't make any sense. It's impossible. There are some religions that are actually tied to an ethnicity. Judaism is not only a religion, it's an ethnic group as well. I am an agnostic. I don't believe in the Torah. In fact, I believe the Torah was written by humans. It's not the word of God. I'm still Jewish, right? I took a DNA test. I'm 99.8% Ashkenazi. If you break down Ashkenazi DNA, you'll see it's partially European, partially Levantine from here, this land. It's different from Islam, which is just a religion. So it's not comparable. So the Jewish people came from this land. This is where our people were created. This is where our original customs, culture, religion, and language came from. So that's what it means to be a people and a religion. And there's other examples. The Druze, which is a population that lives here in Israel and in Lebanon and in Syria, they are also an ethno-religion. So it is a concept that exists, and important to understand that. Now, I do want to leave it by answering Alan's question of what, if you were the prime minister of Israel, what can we do to get us closer to peace? And everyone will have an opportunity to answer this, and then we're going to wrap it up. Who wants to go first?
Can I just say, when he says, like, how do you know? How do you know? I want to just say that in the last 4 days, 4 friends of mine posted about friends of theirs that were missing during the bombings. So they first posted, they said, our friend so-and-so is missing. And 2-3 days later, they find their bodies have been recovered. So these people who are making comments are saying, how do you know there's people stuck in the rubbles? You know, Palestinians right now are removing rubbles with their hands right now. So, I mean, this is like really, really like inconsiderate of many people to say, how do you know? We have buildings that are collapsed on entire families where you have people in the family. They're still pulling bodies out of these rubbles. So this is how we know. It's documented. It's videoed. And if I was prime minister of Israel, I would resign. I would acknowledge that I'm a total failure.
No. The question is not if you are Bibi Netanyahu.
Oh,
It's
okay.
let's say you were elected and it was now in your hands to create peace. What would you do? Now, and wait. Here's the thing. I already know that some responses are going to cause others here to want to respond. We're not going to do that. Everyone can share what they think they would do. Some of it might not make sense to others. We're going to accept it at that, and then we're going to wrap this up, and we can continue this next week.
Okay. So did you want me to respond real quick?
Yeah. What would you do? Mm-hmm.
First of all, any peace solution, whether it's 2 states, federation, confederation, whatever you want, it has to be based on one thing: equality. Equality and the end of something what we call Jewish supremacy. Okay? If I was an Israeli prime minister, I would work with a Palestinian Authority that has legitimacy, that comes from the grassroots, not pick one and boast and give one power and to be supreme and only. The problem with the Israeli government with working, for example, with the PA, is that the PA is seen as an outsourced occupation because we want the PA to do more about security for Israel. Now, if I'm a Palestinian and I am a Palestinian with family in Palestine, and I see the PA going after extremists on the Palestinian side, I wouldn't mind that, because they would say to me, listen, we're not doing this to protect Israel. We're doing this to protect the stability of both Palestine and Israel. So that means while the PA is chasing and dismantling extremist organization on the Palestinian side, the Israelis are doing it at the same time, dismantling the extremists, these lunatics that are running around the West Bank, killing Palestinians, burning their crops and trees. So if you see basically a unified Israeli-Palestinian initiative saying, listen, extremists, you are no longer allowed to control or drive our conflict. I'm going to go after Israeli extremists exactly the way I'm going to go after Palestinian extremists. This would give credibility to the PA and make it appear that the PA is not this outsourced occupation. Because why? Because they'll be able to say, we're going after our extremists, we're going after people in Hamas and Jihad, Islamic Jihad. Because why? They're going to disrupt the stability of our country and destroy the possibilities of us progressing in the future. But if we only rely on the PA to do the dirty work, meanwhile, Smotrich and company and Ben Gvir and his crew are running around massacring people. You have people like the Hilltop Youth, La Familia, and La Heva going around committing Jewish terrorism. This will never work. So we have to acknowledge that we need a unified policy to go after extremism on both sides that is the same. I want to treat a Jewish extremist the same way I treat a Palestinian extremist. Okay? And we need to work with organizations, and we need to stop dismantling those moderates and give them the ability to build the grassroots Palestinian movements and provide a future for them. And it based on equality. Because, I was very upset. Adar, I was very upset with the last presentation because Zach Corner said something to me that literally threw me off the rails. He said, the problem with Palestinians is they're not fighting for peace. They're fighting for justice. And the reason why is there's something called a Carthaginian peace. The Carthaginian peace is when Rome killed Carthage. It killed all the men. It left the women and children to starve. And guess what? It was a period of peace. if this is the peace that, hey, let's kill the Palestinians, because right now it looks like Israel wants one thing: Palestinians die, leave, or submit to Jewish supremacy. And this is not going to work.
Thank you. Who else would like to respond? And let's keep the responses to 2 minutes if possible. David, what would you do? Prime Minister David.
Sorry.
David.
You.
If I was, well, the next morning, I mean, the day after, I would realize that what's happening and the real situation and everything. I would wake up and I would dismantle this kind of state, and I would try to, dismantle this supremacist. I'm sorry to tell, but bullshit. Because every human being is equal. Jews are no less, nor more or less equal. We are all equal. There is no difference. I mean, at least in my eyes and in the eyes of anybody else in the world. I think so. I mean, there are extremists on all sides and everywhere. I mean, I've been through the longest siege in modern history of Europe, which was Sarajevo. I mean, more than 1,400 days. I mean, Palestine in general is nothing in comparison. I mean, Sarajevo is nothing in comparison to Palestine and in Gaza in general. I mean, and I am passionate and I am emotional, and I can see where there is injustice. And just one more thing to add. I mean, Adar, if you are okay with this, and I think Sulha is going in a very positive way to organize episodes about this very itchy topic, which is expulsions of Jews from Arab states.
Sure, we could talk about it. I know what you're hinting at. I know what you're saying is you think it was all caused by the Mossad, but aside from a grenade,
let's have it for another time.
The stream. If you look at the facts, the stream wouldn't go quite as you'd like it to. But I'm definitely happy to talk about that. Thank you, Duba. David, all you.
Yeah, I mean, God forbid, I've some magic. If I had power in Israel, I would aim towards dismantling Zionism. There have to be multiple steps, like possibly like Mordecai Adar Confederation type multiple states or emirate. So immediately, probably Justin's recommendations of cracking down on IDF for settler Israeli behavior, human rights violations. They start prosecuting human rights violations, and a move towards some sort of constitution that would guarantee equal rights to all, and some sort of phase in over a reasonable period of time over the next few years of granting full rights to not only Israeli Arabs, non-Jewish Israeli citizens as they are, and to eventually phasing in some sort of full citizenship to all the Palestinians. So I mean, it'd have to be a complicated plan that would take a multi-year phase in. But there's many things, like Justin said, that could be done immediately to just limit the human rights abuses and move towards that, God willing, eventual society that grants equal rights and civil rights to everybody.
Thanks, David. Zahar, would you like to share? I think Zahar's gone. Okay. I'll wrap it up. So, in order to solve this, we need to recognize the aspirations of both people. And I don't think there could be any solution that doesn't ensure Jews remain safe on the land. But I don't think there could be any solution that doesn't give Palestinians a sense of justice. So I'm not into dismantling the state of Israel. I'm into giving both people a form of self-determination that solves their aspirations, their concerns, and achieves their hopes and dreams, which is certainly possible. Okay? So Palestinians need to recognize that Israel is here to stay. we need to transform Israel to be a state that is acceptable for Palestinians. This starts by giving Palestinians hope. What does this future look like? I think a federation is probably a good solution. It keeps the land whole, which is important for many people on both sides. It allows for a system of checks and balances, which gives autonomy to local populations and doesn't have two populations who have been in conflict with one another for 100 years, competition over one government and one military. So it's kind of a marriage, but with some separation, a system of checks and balance, which can protect both people. And then I would do a whole bunch of good faith measures to show the Palestinians that we are serious about peace, and to really give them hope and something to work towards. So what are these good faith measures? First of all, we could recognize wrongdoing that we've done in the past. We could recognize Palestinian right to self-determination. We could stop expanding settlements. We could replace the military in the West Bank with the civilian police force that Palestinians view as protectors, not as oppressors. We can punish any soldier that abuses their power. Accountability is essential. We could start teaching Israeli children about the Palestinian narrative and struggle. Again, this isn't at the expense of learning about the Jewish struggle and experience. It's about learning both. We could teach our citizens Arabic so we could actually communicate with one another. We could spend money on different reconciliation and peace building efforts, like meetups, like shared sports. We could start to build a unified culture through music. We could release nonviolent prisoners, right? These are all things we could do, all acts of good faith that show Palestinians that the state of Israel is not evil, and you could accept the state of Israel, and we could work together and build a beautiful shared future between the two of us. So yeah, we've had some attempts, but we haven't really scratched the surface at really doing something major to building a shared future between us. And keep in mind, I'm just one person. These are just some ideas. To think that the collective of our nations can come up with a brilliant idea to really reach a peaceful resolution is to not give credit to the brilliance of our nations. Instead, our brilliance goes to militarism and high tech. And high tech is important, but if we just put a fraction of the energy we put towards building weapons towards peace, then we'd be in a very, very different place. So that's what I would do if I was prime minister. And I don't accept anybody, or I don't accept in any way, shape, or form the narrative that there's nothing we could do. It's all on them. And this is true about both sides. We could all do a lot more. Neither side has scratched the surface. Both sides need to take responsibility and work towards this shared future between us. And we are going to end it with that. Thank you all. This was great. These call-in shows, they're fiery. We get a lot of perspectives. It did get heated. Makes for good content. People enjoy that. Alan, thank you. Connor, thank you. Justin, thank you. Zohar, thank you. David, thank you. Oh, Connor, you didn't get to share. Did you want to?
I maybe have some ideas if I was the prime minister of Israel, what I could do. Not much. I'm kind of at a loss to solve this question, to give an answer to the question. But maybe some ideas that I have are, unfortunately, fortunately, I think the settlements, they would have to go. Because it seems like when you look at the map of Palestinian territory in the West Bank, it seems like they have these like islands of land, these like pockets of land. And like, I feel like if you're going to have a sovereign state, you can't have that. You need to have like a contiguous body of land. So I think a lot of these settlements, they might have to just be like, maybe the Israeli government can give the people who live there money to resettle in like different cities. But I feel like we have to give the Palestinians like an actual contiguous body of land to where they can form their state. I also like the Confederacy model. I know you had someone on last week or the week before that.
As the Federation model, yeah.
Yeah, the Federation model. I feel like that could also potentially work out. Maybe like a binational confederated state. Of course, there would be a lot of kinks to work out. Those are kind of just some basic preliminary ideas, but I feel like the settlements are a big obstacle towards peace. And also, of course, the status of Jerusalem also needs to be discussed.
Cool. Thank you all.
Can I
Hopefully
answer
this.
the question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. One, I want to say that I know you guys attempted a good. I didn't feel that you answered the question based on the fact that from 1948 to 1967 there wasn't a single Israeli settlement on the West Bank. But the solution, as I see it, is a demographic one. I think that the Jewish birth rate is increasing and the Arab birth rate is decreasing, coupled with there's more Jews are immigrating than leaving Israel, whereas on the other side, very few people are moving back into the West Bank or Gaza. And unfortunately, with what's happening now, Gaza will probably have a very much smaller population at the end of this than it does now. I never thought of Gaza as being part of the solution. I always thought as the solution would be what the guy said earlier, a one-state solution where once the Jewish population reaches around 70-75%, then you can have a Jewish majority and you can have a Jewish state, and you say, well, that's not fair to the Palestinians. I don't know if they feel that way. I don't know if they, given a choice between living in a democratic Jewish country or a dictatorial Palestinian country, I think they would choose a free Jewish country, even though I'm not saying there's not prejudice in Israel. Obviously there is, but I think it's better than the alternative. And I think that's what will happen eventually. Eventually the Jewish population will be big enough where you can have a one-state solution, a democratic one-state solution. And I think both sides, the regular people, would probably prefer that. And it might sound, I know it sounds, I don't know, maybe even, I don't know what I'm looking for. It sounds bad,
One
but
state with Jewish supremacy. That's what it sounds like. One state.
It's not Jewish supremacy.
Jewish supremacy. That's exactly what it is.
No. One state as long as we can have democracy. That's what you call supremacy.
Alan, you just outflanked us from the left. That was a surprising response. Actually, I appreciate that.
I mean, it makes perfect sense. Let's hold on to all the territories as long as we can maintain that Palestinians will be subjected to our rule. That's totally right.
No. We're talking democracy.
Is that what he said, though? That's not what I took from what he said.
Well, as long as we can be 75% of the population and maintain a majority, let's embrace these Palestinians and accept them as citizens. I mean, and yeah, we'll just get rid of the 2 million of them, and then the rest that are in diaspora, let's leave those out too. That's what he said. Okay. Perfect solution. Well, and then leave leave your 7.5 million Jews that are around the world as well out of it too. No right of return for them.
Would you be okay with right of return for both people? Maybe we cap it 30,000 of each a year.
No, look.
There we go.
In 2000, when Yasser Arafat and Ehud Barak.
No, that's the answer his question. Would you allow right of return for both Palestinians and Jews?
Just
I'm not.
Let everyone share without
answer.
So yeah. We're not going to chat. This is the time where everyone gets to share. There's no challenge.
But you just said that you're gonna that you asked him a question and he outright said he's accused us of not answering the questions. He didn't even answer the question.
I didn't even hear the question.
Would you accept the right of return of Palestinians as well as Jews, even on equal numbers, say 30 to 50,000 a year, both?
Okay, I've already told you I'm not going to put the Palestinians as I don't recognize the Palestinians as a people. Okay, so you want to call me racist?
Anyways,
go ahead.
Thank you, everybody except Alan. Alan, you're a racist and you're the problem. Bye.
Yeah, I'm the problem. Yeah. It's not the people. As long as you blame the Jews for all your problems, you'll never solve anything.
Great. Okay.
Well, he just blamed you. I mean, no offense, but he didn't blame the Jews. He just blamed you.
He blamed me, but if you listen to all his dialogue before that, he took I'm not saying he didn't take any responsibility for the Palestinians, but the fact of the matter is that Israel is a representative democracy. Now, you could say what you want about the government, and I hate Netanyahu too as well, but you don't have that on the other side. And until you have that, I don't know what the Palestinian people, or the people you call Palestinians, what they want. That one guy does not represent he represents himself as far as I'm concerned.
Cool. We're gonna wrap this up. Thank you all. Let's try to leave this on a happy, positive note.
All right.
Despite our differences, for the most part, we can come and engage respectfully. yeah, maybe there was some minor forms of disrespectful engagement, but by and large, everybody did a good job sharing their perspective. It's rare to find this in today's world. You have Twitter where everyone's yelling at each other. So I really appreciate you all coming here and sharing your perspectives and putting yourself in the spotlight. It's not easy putting yourself in a situation where you'll be viewed by 1,000+ people and potentially attacked in the comments. It takes courage. So I commend you all, and everybody watching, of course. Thank you for tuning in. Never forget your ability to impact those around you. This channel alone and this conversation alone will not solve the conflict, but it might change a few minds. And everybody has everybody has the ability to change a few minds. So never forget your ability to inspire those around you, and lead with that. Lead with that. Thank you all.
Okay. Yeah, good work. Thanks for doing this again.